Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the worn-down shoes of a Tudor midwife, and from the very first breath of the journey, you feel the weight of a life that never really pauses. You start your day in darkness, fumbling for your shoes while roosters are still half asleep because in Tudor England someone is always calling for you. There's no gentle alarm tone, no snooze button, just a frantic pounding on your door and a neighbour shouting that goodwife so-and-so has started her pains. And before you've even had a chance to blink the sleep from your eyes, you're already expected to know exactly what to do. You probably won't survive this, but at least it'll make interesting listening. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step out into the dim grey of early morning, the sky looking like old wool soaked in cold water. Your breath hovers in front of you, and every muscle in your body hurts because a Tudor midwife rarely sleeps through the night. It's not unusual to be awake for 20, 30, even 40 hours straight, attending one birth after another, because women go into labour when they go into labour and the world does not wait for you to feel well rested. Your feet drag along the muddy lane, skirt hem already damp. It's funny. You've walked these same paths so often they feel like an extension of your own home, even though half the time you wish you could just vanish into the hedgerow and pretend you didn't hear the summons. But you keep going, because in this era, a midwife is one of the few people who stands between life and death, and everyone expects you to be both miracle worker and bedrock of calm. A mainstream historical fact we know. Tudor midwives handled the majority of births across England, often without formal medical oversight. Physicians considered childbirth women's business and stayed far away unless something catastrophic happened. So the midwife, you, are the entire obstetric department. That would be stressful enough with modern tools, but you're working with little more than experience, good instincts, and a collection of herbs that may or may not help today's mother. You push through the threshold of a timber-framed house and instantly feel the heat from the hearth. The air inside is stuffy, thick with old smoke and a stew of human smells, sweat, wet linen, last night's ale, and something sour you decide not to investigate. A woman crouches low on a stool, groaning through another contraction. Her mother-in-law hovers nearby, wringing her hands, and two neighbours hover like anxious sparrows, offering advice you didn't ask for. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. Some Tudor households believed placing a knife under a birthing stool could cut the pain, while others insisted all knots in the room be loosened, shoelaces, hair ribbons, even the ties on your own sleeves, so nothing would bind the birth. You're expected to just smile and go along with it, even though you know perfectly well the knife under the stool is only going to stab your ankle at some point. As you work, you listen to the mother's breath, to the rhythm of her groans, to the subtle changes in her posture. A midwife's senses must stay sharp, even when your body is begging you to collapse. You've done this so many times you can almost predict the pace of labour from the tension in a woman's hands. But even with all your experience, things can still go wrong. And when they do, they go wrong fast. Historians still argue whether Tudor midwives had broader medical knowledge than we give them credit for. Some records show highly skilled practitioners capable of reducing fevers, turning breech babies, even performing emergency baptisms when death felt too close. Other accounts paint them as poorly trained women relying on charms, gossip, and whatever their mothers taught them. You live somewhere in the middle, part healer, part improviser, part exhausted neighbour who just happens to be the most qualified person within a 5-mile radius. You wipe the labouring woman's brow with a rag that is technically clean, though clean in Tudor England simply means washed recently in cold river water with a prayer for luck. You steady her shoulders as another contraction hits, and your arms strain from supporting her weight. It's astonishing how strong a woman becomes when pain surges through her. You murmur encouragement, your voice low, steady, soothing, the same tone you've used 1,000 times. By now it feels like a second personality. Every few minutes you make quick mental notes, how long between pains, how low the baby might be, the condition of the mother's pulse. You don't have charts or instruments, but your memory works like a ledger filled with dozens of past births. You recall patterns, the last woman who gasped like this pushed far longer than expected, or the last mother who felt cool to the touch ended up fainting halfway through. You never stop comparing, analysing, guessing. It's an invisible, constant hum in the back of your mind. And while you're focused, the household buzzes around you. Someone stokes the fire too vigorously, filling the room with smoke. Someone else insists on boiling more herbs. A child peeks in from the doorway until shooed away. Every distraction grates on your nerves, but you pretend not to notice, because admitting you're overwhelmed is not an option. A midwife must appear composed, even when you feel like you're holding the walls together with sheer will. There's a light joke slipping in when you notice the husband, hovering anxiously at the door. He's pale, sweating, trying not to faint at the sound of his wife's groans. You think, ah yes, yet another brave Tudor man who fought in fields, drank like a devil, and still can't emotionally survive the sound of one contraction. You politely tell him to fetch more warm water, knowing full well it will distract him long enough to stop being a nuisance. You keep your hands steady, your breathing level, your mind alert, because the day has just begun and you have no idea how long this labour will last. Hours, all day, into the night. There's no schedule, no reprieve, no promise of rest. You only know that you will stay until the child is born because this is your duty, your burden, and strangely enough, your calling. You barely get a moment to steady yourself before you're reminded of one of the least glamorous truths of Tudor midwifery. Your tools, those precious objects that determine whether today's delivery goes smoothly or collapses into panic, are shockingly primitive. You reach into your worn leather satchel, the one you've carried so long the strap has moulded to your shoulder, and you feel around for the small collection of items you depend on. And as you sort through them with practiced fingers, you can't help thinking, you really wouldn't want to be doing this job with what you have to work with. Your bag contains bunches of dried herbs tied in string, a small pot of salve that smells faintly of rosemary and lard, a crooked pair of shears that have seen far better decades, and several linen strips rolled into neat bundles. No forceps. The design people imagine today hasn't arrived yet. No stethoscope, because that won't exist for centuries. No antiseptic. No pain relief beyond what nature provides. Just you, your instincts, your hands, and whatever the household can spare. A mainstream historical fact here. Tudor midwives typically relied on herbal knowledge passed orally through generations. Things like pennyroyal for easing pain, rue for cleansing, mugwort for opening the womb, and lavender to calm nerves. But today the mugwort you packed has gone slightly damp from last night's fog, and you know it won't brew properly. The lavender bundle is nearly gone because you used most of it on Tuesday, when a mother spiraled into panic and you needed to soothe her before the real work could even begin. Your resources are always at zero, yet the expectations remain sky high. You set a few items on the rough wooden table near the hearth, and immediately one of the birth gossips gasps and points at your shears. They should be warmed by the fire first, she insists, hands on her hips like a hen ready for battle. You think, yes, they should, if you want them ruined, because Tudor iron tends to warp or crack when repeatedly heated. But you nod politely and place them near, not in the fire, pretending to appease her. A tiny deception in the name of keeping everyone calm. As you prepare your supplies, another fringe tidbit surfaces. Many Tudor midwives carried a wax charm or a carved wooden token to place under a mother's pillow, believed to protect against evil spirits lurking near the threshold of life. You don't really believe this, but if the family expects it, you quietly slip the small token onto the bed. It has a little cross etched into it and the faintest stain of old beeswax. The mother relaxes just a little when she sees it, and even if it's superstition, comfort is comfort. The smells around you shift as someone tosses crushed bay leaves into a pot of steaming water. The scent battles with smoky air and the sharp metallic tang of the iron tools. You wipe your hands on a linen cloth, checking its weave for tears. Linen is expensive, tightly rationed, and households rarely have enough. Half your job is pretending you have more clean cloth than you actually do, folding each piece in strategic ways so the least worn areas face outward. You kneel beside the mother and say gently, "Breathe through this one." Your tone stays light, steady, even though your knees are already protesting. Meanwhile, the husband, still pale, peeks in again, sees the tools, and blanches. You almost laugh when he retreats immediately. For someone who's supposed to run this household, he's dramatically allergic to childbirth. You mix a quick herbal infusion in a tin cup, crushing dried lavender and mint with the wooden end of your spoon. It smells slightly sweet, slightly earthy, slightly like you're brewing tea in a stable. You offer it to the labouring mother, and she sips gratefully. Whether the herbs actually help or whether the warm drink simply distracts her, you don't know, but something in her shoulders relaxes, and that's enough. Historians still argue whether herbal remedies used by midwives had significant pharmacological effects or were more tied to ritual and belief. Some herbs, like willow bark, absolutely had real pain-relieving properties. Others may have been soothing more because of the midwife's reassurance than the plant itself. You're caught in that debate unknowingly, using whatever fragments of knowledge you inherited from older midwives, hoping they help more often than they harm. You check the position of the baby as best you can, pressing gently along the woman's abdomen, feeling for firmness, movement, descent. Your hands have become your most valuable tool, more reliable than anything in your satchel. And when you sense something's not quite right, you pause. Not a breach. Not yet. But the baby's not descending evenly. You tuck that worry into the quiet corner of your mind where you store anxieties you don't have the luxury to voice. Another contraction hits, and the mother squeezes your hand so tightly you swear your fingers flatten. You bite back a joke, something like, "I'll need these fingers later," but you soften it to a quiet, "You're strong. You're doing well." She nods, breathing hard. The heat from the hearth becomes stifling, causing sweat to bead at your temples. Your hair sticks to your forehead in thin strands, and you wipe it away with the cleanest corner of your sleeve. For a moment you wish you had one modern luxury, gloves. But the idea of sterile gloves is centuries away. You work with bare hands, washing them when you can, wiping them when you must, praying the local well isn't contaminated this week. The baby shifts again. You listen, literally listen, with your ear pressed gently against the mother's belly, trying to sense movement and rhythm. It's an intimate, strangely tender act. The mother strokes your hair absently, as though comforting you instead of the other way around, and for a moment you both laugh softly at the absurdity of it. Two exhausted women clinging to composure in a room full of boiling herbs and overly opinionated neighbours. You reach for your shears, now warm but not warped, and test their edge. Dull but usable. Everything here is dull but usable. Even you. You tuck your tools close, preparing for the hours ahead. You know this birth will test you. Not for the last time today, or even the last time this week. A Tudor midwife's tools aren't nearly enough, but you make them work because you have no other choice. You are doctor, surgeon, counsellor, herbalist, and emotional anchor, all rolled into one exhausted human being holding a satchel that's barely worth stealing. And the hardest truth is this: you're only just beginning. You brace yourself as the labouring woman shifts again on her stool, and the household hum grows louder. While you work, you can't help thinking back to how you actually became a midwife in the first place, because in Tudor England, training is a generous word for what you received. There was no grand apprenticeship, no neat little textbook, no line of scholarly women ready to pass down formal medical theory. Instead, you learned from whoever happened to be nearby, whoever was willing to let you watch, whoever didn't shoo you out of the room when danger loomed. You remember being 17, maybe 18. The age records get fuzzy because Tudor villagers rarely kept track of birthdays, and being told to help an older midwife named Joan. She was stern, quick-tempered, and constantly chewing on fennel seeds to freshen her breath. She would yank you into a smoky cottage by the arm, shove a bundle of herbs at you and whisper, "Hold this, don't drop that, and for heaven's sake keep the gossips out of my way." That was your introduction. No ceremony, no exam, just thrown into the fire. A mainstream historical fact. Most Tudor midwives learned through observation and hands-on experience rather than structured education. There were some training manuals written by male physicians, often filled with lofty theories and anatomical guesses based more on ancient Greek text than practical reality. But midwives, especially rural ones, relied almost entirely on practice. Your qualifications came from surviving enough births to convince the community you knew what you were doing. And let's be honest, you didn't always feel like you knew what you were doing. The older midwives taught you the things they believed mattered most: how to read the subtle cues of a woman's body, how to coax a frightened mother into steady breathing, how to judge whether labour was progressing or stalling, how to turn a baby gently by hand if needed. They also taught you strange tricks you still haven't quite decided how seriously to take. like tying a red ribbon around a woman's thigh to draw the child downward, or placing bread soaked in wine near the hearth to appease the household spirits. Some of those lessons you follow out of habit, some out of respect, and some because the family insists, and frankly, you don't have the energy to argue. One fringe tidbit that always returns to your mind: certain Tudor midwives swore by wearing a special apron stitched with secret prayers. Supposedly, the words sewn into the fabric protected both the midwife and the mother. You've never owned such an apron. Those took time, materials, and needlework skill you simply didn't have, but you've seen one once. The threads were faded, the fabric stiff with age, but the midwife who wore it claimed she hadn't lost a mother in 20 years. Whether that was true or boasting, well, you keep the idea tucked away like a charm in your memory. Back in the present, you reach for another cloth, though you have only a few left. The mother groans deeply, gripping the edges of the stool, and you ease yourself behind her, gently supporting her back. Your movements are careful, practiced, muscle memory you built long before you ever felt fully prepared. The truth is, you're still not fully prepared. Not for everything. No one is. You've simply learned to look confident enough that the room believes you. Historians still argue whether the informal, unsystematic training of Tudor midwives made them dangerously underprepared or surprisingly competent. Some scholars insist midwives were skilled experts whose hands-on experience gave them unmatched instincts. Others claim they were closer to lucky amateurs, surviving only because most births happen without intervention. The truth, as you feel every day, lies somewhere in that muddled grey area. You know a great deal, but you also know how much lies beyond your reach. You remember your first birth alone, when Joan couldn't make it because she'd twisted her ankle on a frozen lane. You stepped into the dim cottage with shaking hands, the fire barely burning, the expectant mother sweating and swearing, her mother pacing and the neighbour insisting the baby would arrive in the next minute surely. You'd nodded, swallowed hard and pretended everything was under control, and when the baby finally came, pink, wriggling, and screaming with righteous fury, you cried too from pure relief. No one noticed. They were too busy praising the newborn. That memory helps you now, grounding you as you work through another contraction with today's mother. You murmur something calm, something reassuring, though you barely register the words. Your voice becomes a tool of its own, soft-edged, steady, convincing. You may not have had formal training, but you've mastered the art of appearing unshakable, even when your stomach twists with uncertainty. Another tiny, sleepy joke slips through your mind. If Tudor midwives had universities, the lectures would last 12 hours, and the final exam would be, deliver a breech baby by candlelight while 3 relatives shout instructions at you. Honestly, that sounds about right. The mother breathes deeply now, gripping your hands. Her fingers dig painfully into your skin, but you don't complain. You've had hands squeezed, sleeves torn, hair pulled, and once, very memorably, you were bitten. Childbirth brings out a woman's hidden strength, and her ability to maul anything within grabbing distance. As you reposition her slightly, you note the way her abdomen tightens, the pace of her breathing, the tremble in her legs. All clues, all part of the endless puzzle you've trained for without ever setting foot in a classroom. You whisper, you're doing well, because part of your training, informal as it was, emphasized not only physical skill but emotional steadiness. A midwife must be a pillar, a calm presence, the eye of the storm. You cannot tremble even when you want to. When the contraction passes, you use the brief quiet to assess your tools again, mentally reviewing what you learned years ago from Joan. Keep your cloths close, keep your hands clean, keep your thoughts clear, and keep your voice steady. Those 4 rules carried you through dozens of births. They carry you still. But another contraction rises quickly, too quickly. The mother gasps sharply, bending forward. You place your hands firmly on her sides, guiding her movements, steadying her. Sweat beads on her brow, her breaths shorten. Something shifts, something real, something that makes your instincts sharpen. This is where the lack of formal training haunts you. You rely on sensation, on experience, on memory, not on medical diagrams or anatomical charts. You trust your hands more than any ink on a page. You lean closer, listening carefully. Good, you whisper. Stay with it. You're strong. And she is. Your training may have been a patchwork of borrowed methods, half-remembered lessons and sheer survival, but it moulded you into someone capable, someone resilient, someone who can stand in a cramped, smoky cottage and guide a mother through the most terrifying moment of her life. And despite everything, despite the fear, the fatigue, the constant uncertainty, some part of you wouldn't trade that for anything, at least not most days. You barely have time to adjust your aching knees before someone in the household mutters something about fetching the priest if things turn dire, and that familiar chill settles across your spine. Because in Tudor England, your work is never just practical. It's monitored, judged, and sometimes outright meddled with by the church. You're not simply a healer. You're a woman working under a system that can strip your livelihood with a single accusation. And that fear follows you into every cottage, every birth room, every whispered conversation. You remind yourself, because you must, that you hold a license from the local ecclesiastical court, a document meant to confirm your right to practice. But calling it a license makes it sound modern, tidy, official. In reality, it's a flimsy sheet of parchment with ink smudges, issued after you swore an oath to deliver children honestly, avoid harmful charms, and baptize any dying infants immediately. All under the eye of men who've never attended a single birth. It's a miracle the parchment hasn't crumbled from the stress you've projected onto it. A mainstream historical fact: Tudor midwives were regulated by church authorities, not medical ones. They took formal oaths, often promising not to use sorcery, to uphold moral standards, and to assist with emergency baptisms. It sounds straightforward until you realise those same churchmen could drag you before a court if they even suspected you broke that oath. And suspicion is a cheap currency in this time, easy to spend, hard to refute. As you kneel beside the labouring woman, you overhear the mother-in-law whispering to a neighbour. She seems skilled enough, but you know how some midwives are. Some meddle in God's mysteries. You exhale slowly, resisting the urge to roll your eyes so hard they detach. Because what she calls God's mysteries is usually something as mundane as turning a baby's position by hand, which, to be clear, is not a demonic act, just practical. You say nothing because arguing with the older women of the household is a guaranteed way to make your job harder. Instead, you adjust the mother's stool gently, guiding her hips at a slight angle. Your movements are measured, deliberate. Every gesture must appear harmless, holy, and above all, respectable. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some midwives kept a tiny bottle of consecrated water hidden in their apron folds, not just for emergencies, but to comfort panicking families. Whether the water was truly consecrated or just river water with a good backstory, well, that depends on the midwife. You keep yours tucked safely away, more for the reassurance it offers others than for your own conviction. Another contraction comes hard and fast, and you brace the mother's shoulders, whispering calm encouragement. Your voice lowers instinctively, slipping into the soft rhythm the older midwife Joan taught you years ago. Steady, slow, almost prayer-like. Not because it's a religious requirement, but because it helps mothers breathe. Still, some families like to believe your words carry divine approval, and you're not about to argue when someone is screaming through labour. Historians still argue whether church oversight helped to legitimise midwifery or hindered it. Some claim the sworn oath protected mothers from untrained practitioners. Others say it placed dangerous moral pressure on women who needed flexibility, not surveillance. You live at the centre of that debate, your daily life shaped by rules created far from the birthing stool. You sense someone hovering behind you and turn to find the village priest peering into the room like a worried rooster. He looks perfectly groomed for someone who will never have to scrub blood out of linen. "All well here?" he asks, voice thin, already tense. You force a polite smile. All is progressing as expected. That phrase in Tudor midwifery translates loosely to, "I'm exhausted. The mother is exhausted. The baby is taking its sweet time, and if everyone doesn't calm down, someone's going to faint, and it probably won't be me." The priest nods and steps back, grateful to escape the heat, the noise, and the sight of genuine female labour. You don't blame him. Most men in this era avoid childbirth like it's a plague-ridden stable, and given how often plague-ridden stables exist in this world, it's an understandable instinct. As he retreats, the mother whimpers, and you press a warm compress gently to her back. She leans into your touch, her breath hitching. You murmur reassurance, feeling the room's tension rise and fall like waves. It's incredible how much the presence, or absence, of trust shapes a birth, and how much the church, hovering in the background of your entire profession, affects that trust. You remember the time you were summoned to court because someone claimed you whispered a strange phrase during labour. You tried to explain it was simply a calming technique, something passed down, something harmless. But for weeks afterward, villagers watched you with narrowed eyes, as though a few soothing syllables might conjure demons. Eventually the matter was dropped, not because the court fully believed you, but because too many mothers vouched for your skill. That experience left a mark. Even now you weigh every whispered encouragement, every gesture, every herbal remedy, always asking yourself, will this be misunderstood? Will someone twist this into something dangerous? Another contraction hits hard. The mother cries out, clutching your arm. You focus on her face, her breath, the trembling of her legs. This is the real work, not the oaths, not the court, not the judgment. Just helping a woman survive the most precarious moment of her life. A light joke flickers in your mind. If the church really wanted to regulate childbirth, they should try attending one. That would cure their interest in about 5 minutes. You keep that thought to yourself, though the corner of your mouth twitches. You guide the mother through the contraction, murmuring steady encouragement. She leans into you, trusting you completely, something the church never quite manages to understand. Midwifery is intimate, raw, human. It can't be codified by oaths alone. As the contraction eases, you wipe her brow again, listening to her ragged breaths. The fire crackles beside you, shadows flickering across the cramped room. You take stock of your tools, your dwindling cloths, and the rising tension in the air. You've navigated the church's scrutiny for years, learned how to stay invisible when necessary, how to blend skill with acceptable piety. But no amount of oversight will help you in the next hour. Only your experience, imperfect, unlicensed in the modern sense, born from real practice, will decide what happens next. And the real challenges haven't even begun. The fire pops sharply beside you, sending a sprinkle of sparks upward, and for a moment the tiny lights look like stars desperate to escape the claustrophobic cottage. You wish you could escape with them, because as the labour deepens and the room grows warmer, you begin to feel the other force pressing in on you. Superstition. Not gentle folklore, not charming tradition, but the relentless, unpredictable beliefs that shape every movement you make in a Tudor birth room. You shift your weight, supporting the mother through another contraction, and just as it eases a little, the mother-in-law darts forward with the determination of someone who has thoughts. She holds a small bundle in her hands, wrapped tightly in a square of linen. Place this under her feet, she insists. It will bring the child faster. You already know what it is, even before she unwraps it. A piece of stale bread sprinkled with salt. Another birth charm, another household tradition you're expected to honour. A mainstream historical fact. Tudor childbirth was steeped in superstition. Charms, amulets, whispered prayers, loosed knots, specific herbs tied to doorframes, and even certain Bible verses believed to ease labour when read aloud. The ritualistic atmosphere wasn't optional. It was woven into the process so thoroughly that a midwife had to navigate it as skillfully as the birth itself. You nod politely because refusing would cause more panic than the bread would. You slip the bundle under the mother's feet, adjusting it so it doesn't interfere with her stance. The mother-in-law breathes a proud little sigh, as though she personally solved childbirth. You refrain from pointing out that the mother's feet are sweaty, and the bread will likely turn into salty paste by morning. Meanwhile, one of the neighbours begins muttering a half-remembered charm, something about opening the road and loosening the path. You don't interrupt her. Let her talk. People cling to beliefs like these because they're terrified, and terrified people need something to do with their hands and voices. Another contraction slams into the mother, and you press your palm gently to her back, guiding her breathing. She whimpers, folding forward. You murmur steady encouragement as you help adjust her knees and hips. While you work, an older woman hovers behind you, clutching a bundle of keys tied with a ribbon. "Should I put these under her pillow?" she whispers loudly, as though discussing a covert military operation. It wards off. "Yes," you say gently before she can finish, because the last thing you need is a conversation about warding off evil spirits while the mother is in full agony. She beams at your agreement and shuffles off to slip the keys under the pillow, where they will poke awkwardly into the mother's neck later. But you'll deal with that when the time comes. You take a breath, trying not to laugh at the absurdity. A quiet joke nudges its way into your thoughts. If every charm worked as promised, Tudor babies would just fall out like apples from a basket. You keep the humour carefully tucked behind your teeth as you help the mother through another wave. The room grows hotter, more crowded, more frantic. Herbs hang from the rafters, dried sage, lavender, rosemary, each with a purpose the household swears by. You glance upward, pretending to assess their arrangement, though really you're checking how many are likely to fall into your hair the moment someone slams the door. A fringe tidbit fits perfectly here. Some households insisted all knots in the room be undone so nothing would symbolically tie the baby inside the mother. That meant unlacing shoestrings, untying aprons, loosening hair braids, even opening drawstrings on storage bags. Once, a woman insisted you undo the knots on your own underskirt while she went through labour, a memory you've tried very hard to bury. Today, thankfully, this household hasn't demanded anything quite so invasive. Yet. But the mother-in-law does shoot a suspicious glance at your braided hair, as though calculating the spiritual impact of your hairstyle on her grandchild's progress. Historians still argue whether Tudor superstitions hindered or helped midwifery. Some believe these rituals created calm, psychological anchors in a terrifying process. Others argue they distracted midwives from practical tasks or pressured them into performing pointless, sometimes dangerous acts. You rarely take a firm stance in that debate. You're too busy juggling it all, weaving superstition and skill into something that resembles hope. The mother grips your arm with surprising force as another contraction seizes her. You breathe with her, slow and steady. Sweat trickles down your back, soaking your gown. You whisper a calming rhythm, and the mother clings to your words like a rope thrown into rough seas. When the pain subsides, she leans her head against your shoulder. You stroke her back gently, letting her rest. Her breath shudders. Her body trembles. Childbirth is a storm, and you are her anchor. But then the neighbour woman with the keys returns, whispering urgently, "We forgot the doorposts. We must mark the doorpost with blessed chalk." She holds up a small piece of chalk like it's a sacred relic. Chalk is chalk, but you nod anyway. Better chalk than more bread. She scurries to the doorway, scribbling little crosses along the frame. Each mark leaves a dusty trail that will smear later, but right now it makes her feel helpful. And sometimes, letting people feel helpful is half the job. As you help the mother shift positions, your mind flicks back to other births, ones where superstitions spiraled into chaos. The household that insisted on singing psalms in incorrect Latin. The grandmother who shoved garlic into a birthing stool because evil spirits hate the smell. The woman who tried to force a cat out of the room mid-contraction because she feared the creature would steal the baby's breath. That one turned into a whole slapstick mess of shrieks, cat fur, and a confused spouse. You nearly lost your mind. Today is mercifully calmer. Chaotic, yes, but within normal Tudor levels of chaos. You press a warm cloth against the mother's lower back again. Her breathing steadies. She groans but doesn't panic. You whisper something gentle, something reassuring, something that isn't a charm but could easily pass as one. The household relaxes a fraction. Superstition isn't your enemy, you remind yourself. It's the air these people breathe. Your skill must work around it, within it, sometimes in spite of it. If you want to help this woman survive, and you do, with every fibre of your tired being, you need to accept that every birth is half medicine, half ritual, and wholly exhausting. The mother closes her eyes for a moment, gripping your hand. The next wave is coming. You can feel it in her muscles, see it in the rise of her chest. You brace yourself. The storm hasn't peaked yet, not by a long shot. You shift your aching back, preparing for the next contraction, when a knock rattles the cottage door, sharp, hurried, unmistakable. A neighbour pokes her head in, cheeks flushed, breathless. "Midwife," she gasps. "You're needed across the lane. Another wife's begun her pains." And just like that, you remember the part of your job nobody glamorizes. You're required to walk into any home, at any hour, under conditions that could charitably be described as hazardous, and less charitably described as you're walking straight into a health and safety nightmare long before such a concept exists. Because Tudor homes, they're cramped, they're smoky, they're stuffed with livestock, soot, children, ill relatives, damp rushes, mouldy beams, and an atmosphere that could make a modern health inspector faint on sight. You take a steadying breath. The mother you're with now seems to have a brief lull, between pains, enough to rest. You squeeze her hand, promise you'll return quickly, and slip out into the narrow, dark lane. The air outside hits you like a damp cloth. Cold, thick, tinged with the smell of manure and burning wood. You hike up the hem of your gown to avoid collecting half the village mud, muttering a soft joke under your breath. If mud were currency, midwives would be richer than the king. It isn't your best joke, but exhaustion lowers your comedic standards, a mainstream historical fact. Tudor villages were notoriously cramped, with most houses built from timber and daub, poorly ventilated, and constantly filled with smoke from open hearths. The average home had a single main room where cooking, sleeping, and working happened simultaneously. Privacy didn't exist. Cleanliness was relative, and disease spread through these tight quarters like gossip at a market stall. You arrive at the next cottage and duck inside, immediately engulfed by heat and stink. The room is dimly lit by a single tallow candle, smoke curling upward from the hearth in lazy spirals. A chicken scurries across the floor, offended by your entrance. You step over it, wondering, not for the first time, why every Tudor birth seems to involve livestock as unsolicited emotional support animals. The woman in labour sits on a low bench, gripping the edge with white knuckles. Her face is flushed, sweat dripping down her temples. Her husband hovers uselessly nearby, clutching a pewter mug like it contains divine wisdom. He sees you and straightens, as if your arrival alone could chase away every bad outcome. No pressure. Her pains started suddenly, he says, voice pitched high with panic. They usually do, you reply gently, though your tone carries the dry humour of someone who has seen enough panicked husbands to fill a book. Let me see her. You kneel beside the woman, ignoring the gritty rushes poking your knees. The scent in this room is stronger than in the last. Sour ale, damp wood, smoke that clings to your hair instantly, and something fishy you decide not to investigate. You've learned not to ask too many questions about smells. The answers are rarely comforting. A fringe tidbit. Some Tudor homes stored salted fish, cured meats, or even full root cellar items indoors during winter, especially if they feared spoilage or thieves. This means your birthing environment sometimes features onions drying from rafters, rabbits hanging near the hearth, or barrels of pickled something permeating the entire space. You once delivered a baby while staring at a pig's head on the table. You still remember its expression. You place your hands on the woman's abdomen, feeling for the baby's position. She exhales shakily, gripping your forearm. "It hurts," she whispers. "I know," you say softly, smoothing her hair. "You're safe. Breathe with me." You guide her through a slow inhalation, then an even slower exhalation, the rhythm, soothing her chest. While you work, the husband paces, bumping into the table, producing a loud clatter that startles everyone, including the chicken. It squawks indignantly, flapping its wings. You sigh. Chickens are never helpful in moments like this. Historians still argue whether Tudor homes were actually more dangerous during childbirth than we imagine, or whether modern biases make us assume the worst. Some evidence shows surprisingly resourceful methods for keeping spaces clean, fresh rushes, regular sweeping, even seasonal fumigation with herbs. But other records point to overwhelming filth, rodent infestations, and illnesses spreading rapidly in these tight quarters. You've seen both extremes. Today's house falls comfortably into the hazardously lived-in category. The labouring woman groans loudly, bending forward. You place a steady hand on her back, helping her shift. Her breathing quickens. Another contraction rises swiftly. You murmur calming encouragement, even as your mind races. You have one woman labouring across the lane, and another progressing quickly here. You're one person with two bodies depending entirely on you. Your pulse skitters. The husband asks, "Is it too soon? Should I fetch someone?" "No," you reply with controlled calm. "She's progressing normally." Internally, you add, "Which means I need to divide myself in half like a conjurer." The chicken pecks at your shoe. You ignore it with the dignity of a saint. When the contraction passes, you check her pulse, her breathing, her posture. She's strong. Tired, but strong. You guide her to a slightly different position, one that might help the baby descend more evenly. She nods weakly, grateful for the direction. A tiny joke bubbles up. If Tudor design manuals existed, chapter 1 would be, "Why windows are bad and smoke is your friend." You smile thinly at the absurd thought. As the woman rests, you make a quick decision. You instruct her husband to keep her calm, offer her sips of warm ale or water, and watch her breathing. Then you slip back outside, because the first mother is still waiting, still in pain, still counting on you. The cold air outside slaps your cheeks, refreshing and brutal. You take a breath, steadying your nerves. Your hands shake slightly, not from fear, but from sheer physical exhaustion. You've been awake far too long, but Tudor midwives don't get breaks. You walk back toward the first cottage, silently hoping neither labour turns disastrous in the next few minutes. The moon glints faintly through low clouds, guiding you like a half-hearted lantern. You push into the cottage where you began, the air thick and hot, the room buzzing with anticipation. The mother looks up at you with desperation and relief. "You're back," she rasps. "Of course I'm back," you whisper, taking her hand. "I'm not leaving you." The storm is building in both households now. The night is far from over, and as you kneel, beside the mother again, surrounded by smoke, superstition, livestock, and the chaos of Tudor living, you understand, more deeply than ever, why no one in their right mind would envy your profession. And still, you carry on. You settle beside the labouring mother again, your bones aching as though they've aged a decade in the short walk between houses. She grips your wrist with surprising strength, her eyes wide and searching your face for reassurance you barely have the energy to give. You murmur something soothing, half encouragement, half prayer, all instinct, and reach for a clean cloth to wipe the sweat from her brow. Except, of course, the moment your hand lands on the basket, you realise the unavoidable truth of Tudor midwifery. Clean linens are never where you need them, never as clean as you'd like, and never in the quantity the job demands. You sift through the basket and find exactly 3 cloths left that pass for fresh, and even those have suspicious discolorations you diplomatically pretend not to see. A mainstream historical fact: linens were among the most precious household items in Tudor England. Most families owned only a few sets, often patched, rehemmed, and reused until the weave practically dissolved. Laundry required enormous labour: heating water, hauling it, rinsing, scrubbing, beating cloth against river stones, then drying everything in unpredictable English weather. Clean cloth was a luxury, not a standard. The mother-in-law spots you hesitating over the linen pile and immediately bustles over. "That one's clean enough," she insists, pointing to a cloth with a faint brown streak that you sincerely hope is old broth. You nod politely, because arguing won't magically produce better cloth. You pick up the least offensive piece and fold it carefully, so the questionable section remains out of sight, your personal version of Tudor quality control. As you dab the mother's forehead, she leans into your touch, her breath trembling. "Thank you," she whispers, though her eyes flick to the cloth suspiciously. She may be in agony, but even she can tell this linen has lived a life. You offer a soft joke, voice barely above a murmur. "It's the freshest one in the kingdom. I checked." She actually chuckles, tight and breathless. Good. Humour helps more than any herb. But beneath your calm expression lies a running calculation. How many clean cloths are left? How many will you need? How many could you stretch if the birth becomes difficult? You feel like a general rationing supplies in a siege, with less glory and more bodily fluids. The mother inhales sharply as a contraction hits, and you guide her gently through the pain. When it passes, you help her shift position, sliding another folded linen beneath her for support. Immediately you see the fabric absorb moisture, and your stomach sinks. 2 cloths left now. 2. You've been to households where they had plenty of cloth, meaning maybe 6 or 7 pieces stored in a chest. Today you're working with scraps and hope. In other births you've resorted to cutting strips from old aprons, children's tunics, even curtain edges. Once, during a winter birth, the only dry fabric available was a man's shirt frozen stiff from a night outdoors. You thawed it by the hearth while silently rethinking your entire career. A fringe tidbit comes to mind. Some households kept a special set of linens called bearing cloths, reserved exclusively for childbirth and christening. These were often decorated with embroidery, symbols, or stitched prayers. Wealthier families might have brightly dyed cloths trimmed with lace. Poorer families might have one slightly nicer square of linen saved from a grandmother's wedding chest. You've seen both kinds. Today, of course, you get the practical unadorned scraps. You glance toward the hearth and spot a pile of freshly warmed cloth someone placed too close to the fire. You hurry over to check them, only to find they've absorbed the smoky scent of burning tallow and have tiny flecks of ash embedded in the weave. Not ideal, not even acceptable. But in Tudor midwifery, not acceptable often transforms into, we must make do. You salvage two that aren't singed and lay them aside for later. They'll need to cool before you use them, otherwise the mother might think you're trying to cook her. Behind you, one of the birth gossips whispers to another. A good midwife always knows how to keep cloths ready. You inhale slowly, counting to 3. If you had a single gold coin for every unhelpful opinion offered during labour, you'd retire to a quiet cottage by the sea and never look at linen again. Historians still argue whether midwives struggled more with cleanliness than we assume, or whether households truly took pains to prepare for births. Some accounts describe families saving their best cloths for months, washing them carefully in anticipation. Others describe chaotic, filthy environments where midwives had to improvise constantly. You've lived the second version more often than the first. You return to the mother, gently placing a slightly warm cloth behind her back. She sighs in relief. For a moment the room feels calm. You brush a wisp of hair from her face, and she grips your hand. "Bless you," she whispers. Another contraction tightens her body, and you brace her shoulder, guiding her breath, murmuring the familiar rhythm. The cloth beneath her absorbs more sweat, more strain, and you feel another pang of worry. You need fresh ones soon. A sudden idea strikes you. You turn to the mother-in-law. "Fetch me your cleanest apron," you say. Her eyebrows shoot up. "My apron?" "Yes," you reply calmly. "It's sturdy linen and will serve well." She hesitates, torn between superstition and practicality. Then she unties it reluctantly and hands it over. You fold it quickly, smiling reassuringly. She watches you like you're violating some long-held household rule, but she doesn't protest. A tiny joke floats through your thoughts. If midwives were paid in aprons, we'd all retire with wardrobes fit for royalty. You keep this, one to yourself, though the corner of your mouth twitches. As you tuck the apron beneath the mother's hips, she exhales shakily. The cloth feels sturdier, cleaner, and for a moment you feel a small, triumphant spark. Midwifery is equal parts skill and creative textile management. Still, you can't ignore the looming problem. One woman labouring here, another across the lane, and your linen supply stretched thinner than worn-out hosiery. You wipe your hands on your own apron, already stained from the night's work, and move close to the mother as she braces for another contraction. The room thickens with heat and anticipation. Shadows dance on the walls. The linen basket sits nearly empty, watching you like an omen. You whisper, "You're doing well," guiding her through the wave of pain, and in the back of your mind you're already calculating how to beg, borrow or repurpose more cloth before the night is over. Because in Tudor England, survival often hangs by a thread, and tonight you're nearly out of thread. You hardly have time to savour the small victory over the linen situation before the air in the cottage shifts, subtly at first, like the moment before a storm breaks. You hear footsteps outside, multiple feet on the packed earth, hushed voices, the unmistakable rustle of skirts. Then the door creaks open without ceremony, and in pour the birth gossips, a lively, opinionated, utterly unavoidable ensemble of neighbourhood women whose presence turns every childbirth into a noisy social event. Some midwives dread them, some tolerate them. No midwife has ever successfully avoided them. They flood the room like geese squeezing through a barn door, chattering, bustling, commenting on everything from the weather to the mother's breathing rhythm. They carry baskets of token offerings, bread, ale, herbs that are either helpful or completely useless, and occasionally a treat for themselves. One woman brings a small jar of honey and immediately places it on the table as if she's donating treasure to a shrine. A mainstream historical fact. The gossips, or godsibs, were an expected part of Tudor childbirth. These were the female relatives and neighbours who gathered to support the labouring mother, provide warmth, prayers, chatter, and, let's be honest, unsolicited advice by the bucketful. They created the social atmosphere of birth long before medicalised delivery rooms existed. Of course, their version of support varies wildly. "Her colour looks poor," says one woman, squinting at the mother as if she's examining turnips at market. "She needs warming ale," another declares, reaching for the ladle with alarming enthusiasm. "You're holding her wrong," a third woman announces to you, the trained midwife. You breathe in slowly through your nose, through your frustration, through the thick haze of burning wood and rising body heat. You keep your tone soft, gentle, immovable. "Thank you. She's in good hands." This does not stop them. Nothing stops them. The mother groans through another contraction, and the sound immediately triggers a flurry of contradictory commands from the gossips. "Lean forward! Lean back! Pray louder! Don't pray at all! Breathe quickly! Breathe slowly! She needs broth! She needs space! She needs less talking!" You want to say, yes, she absolutely needs less talking, but you swallow the thought. The last thing a Tudor midwife wants is to be outnumbered by overheated, highly invested aunties. One of the gossips pulls up a stool and sits so close to you her skirts brush your arm. She leans in conspiratorially. "You know, when I gave birth, they used hot plasters on my back, saved my life." You smile tightly and reach for a cloth. "Every woman needs something different." She nods, proud of her contribution, and launches into a detailed recounting of her last 3 labours. You could recite her stories by heart. They're the same stories she tells at every birth. You suspect she enjoys reliving them more than she enjoys her actual grandchildren. A fringe tidbit that always makes your eyelid twitch. Some gossips believe that if they spoke too quietly during labour, evil spirits could creep into the silence. So they talked. Loudly. Constantly. Birth rooms were rarely quiet, despite what modern people imagine. Some rooms even erupted into festive chatter between contractions, as though childbirth were a social outing with snacks. Speaking of snacks, a woman unwraps a small cloth bundle and reveals a hard cheese with a triumphant smile. She offers you a piece. You decline politely. She shrugs and begins chewing loudly, very loudly, right beside the mother's head. The mother squeezes her eyes shut as though wishing she could block out everything, including the cheese. You reposition the mother gently, guiding her breath as the next contraction builds. Your voice becomes the low, steady hum in the room, soft, grounding, something for her to cling to in a sea of noise. She squeezes your hand desperately and you murmur, "I'm here. Stay with me. Breathe softly." Behind you, someone whispers, "The baby is taking too long. It must be the witching hour." You inhale slowly. You do not respond. Historians still argue whether superstition intensified or soothed the communal birth environment. Some scholars say the gossips provided emotional structure and continuity for mothers. Others argue they added stress to an already overwhelming experience. You, standing in the middle of them, know the truth. They can be both a blessing and a headache. Sometimes in the same minute. A gossip places a hand on the mother's shoulder and says something meant to be comforting but sounds like an omen. "Don't worry, my dear. If you die, the midwife will baptize the babe quick enough." You shoot her a look so sharp she actually steps back. Another contraction seizes, the mother pulling her forward with a cry. You brace her carefully, ignoring the overlapping commentary behind you. You breathe with her, slow, steady. She trembles, but she stays focused on your voice, not the rising storm around her. The gossips, sensing the peak of pain, switch tactics from advice to prayer. Some mutter familiar lines. One recites a half-remembered verse that accidentally invokes the wrong saint. Another hums tunelessly, possibly to soothe herself more than the mother. A small joke flickers in your exhausted mind. "If I charge per unsolicited suggestion, I'd afford a house with actual chimneys instead of smoke holes." Just as you guide the mother through the worst of the contraction, the door bursts open again, another gossip late to the party. She rushes in, apron flapping, cheeks flushed. "I brought broth," she announces. "Who needs broth?" Everyone points at someone else. No one wants broth. You continue working, weaving your way through the chaos with the grace of someone who's done this 100 times. You reposition the mother again, check the descent, whisper encouragement. One of the gossips fans the mother with a folded cloth, creating a small breeze that is shockingly helpful. One rare moment of useful gossip behavior you tuck away like a gem. But even as you steady the mother, you catch something in her breathing. A shift, deeper, more strained. A sign, a warning. Something is changing. Something important. The noise of the gossips fades in your mind, replaced by sharpened focus. You steady her shoulders. The mother clings to your arm. The tension hums through the room. The next phase is coming, and the gossips, helpful or not, will only make it more complicated. The moment you sense the shift in the mother's breathing, the deeper strain, the tension gathering low in her abdomen, You know what's coming next, or at least you know what should be coming next. But nature doesn't care about your schedule, your exhaustion, or the fact that you already have another labouring woman across the lane. No, nature has decided it is time for the next stage, and of course it chooses to begin just as the evening deepens into the kind of darkness only Tudor England can produce. Because nighttime deliveries aren't just inconvenient, they're dangerous. The fire pops sharply, casting the room into flickering gold and shadow. The gossips continue their chorus of commentary, but your mind is already beyond them, beyond the cottage walls, beyond the heat and noise. You're thinking about the worst part of being a Tudor midwife, having to travel through unlit lanes, mud-slick pathways, and unpredictable village corners at night, often alone, often terrified, often without so much as a candle stub to guide your way. A mainstream historical fact. Tudor nights were dark. No street lamps, no guided torches unless someone had coin to spare. Just moonlight, starlight, and occasionally the faint orange glow of a hearth through a shuttered window. Most people stayed indoors after dusk for safety, but midwives, you went wherever you were needed, no matter how risky the journey. Which is exactly why your heart sinks when the neighbour boy bursts through the cottage door panting hard. His cheeks are flushed, his breath clouding in the warm air. "Mistress Midwife," he wheezes. "My mother says the other woman's pains are faster now. She's calling for you." You swallow hard. Of course she is. You feel the walls close in. You look at the mother in front of you, sweating, trembling, gripping your arm, and then at the boy whose wide eyes show he's been told not to return without you. Behind you, a gossip mutters, "Well, she can't be in two places at once." Another whispers, "You should send someone else," as though childbirth can be delegated to whoever happens to be nearby, like borrowing a cup of sugar. You take a steady breath, the kind that feels like it has weight. You say to one of the calmer gossips, "Stay with her, keep her breathing steady. If she feels pressure in her back, call me immediately." She nods, wide-eyed, honoured by the assignment. You grab your satchel, lighter now, its precious linens mostly used, and step outside. The cold night slaps your face with the force of a wet mitten. A thin layer of fog has rolled over the village, hugging the earth so closely it feels like you're walking through someone's breath. You can barely see the path beneath your feet. Your shoes sink into mud so deep it threatens to claim one of them as tribute. You mutter a quiet joke to yourself. If this mud gets any deeper, I'll need a boat instead of boots. The boy trots ahead, glancing back every few steps to make sure you're still following. His lantern is tiny, just a candle inside a punched tin holder, but it throws little dots of trembling light onto the ground. It is barely enough to show the path, but without it you'd be stumbling blindly. As you walk, you pass houses with shutters closed tight, faint flickers of firelight escaping through slits. Dogs bark in the distance. Somewhere far off an owl calls, its echo stretching into the dark like a warning you try very hard not to interpret symbolically. Historians still argue whether Tudor villagers genuinely feared the night or simply respected its dangers. Some accounts depict people scurrying indoors before sunset, believing evil spirits roamed freely in the dark. Others suggest villagers were practical. They avoided night travel because of thieves, animals, potholes, and the very real risk of breaking an ankle in total blackness. You know both fears are valid. You've stumbled on unseen stones, slipped in unseen mud, and once nearly walked into an ox sleeping in a path. Tonight at least the path is clear of livestock. Small mercies. You reach the cottage quickly, it's close thank heaven, and slip inside. The room is dimmer than the one you left, lit only by a single rushlight burning low in a dish of fat. The air is heavy, humid, tinged with the scent of fear. The second mother sits hunched forward, gripping a stool so tightly her knuckles look bleached. Her husband stands nearby, holding her shoulders as though afraid she'll fall into the hearth. He looks up at you with desperate relief. "Thank God you came." You kneel immediately beside her. "Tell me what you feel." She exhales shakily. Pressure. Strong. Low. Another wave grips her. She cries out. You brace her back, guiding her breath. You assess her quickly. Mind sharp, movement steady. The baby is low. Too low for comfort, but progressing. You exhale slowly, letting your instincts settle. Behind you, the husband paces nervously. "Should I call my sister? Or fetch someone? I can fetch someone." You shake your head. Stay with her. She needs you here. A light joke flits through your tired mind. Though based on every birth I've ever attended, husbands mostly faint, panic, or hover uselessly. But sure, stay. You keep this one tucked behind your lips for later. Another contraction hits and the mother cries out, her voice raw. You support her gently, whispering reassurance. Outside, the wind moans through the thatch, rattling the shutters. The cottage feels like a tiny island, adrift in a sea of darkness. You work with relentless focus for several minutes, helping her shift, checking the baby's descent, repositioning her shoulders, until finally her breathing steadies. You ease her onto a straw-stuffed mattress, layering the cleanest cloth you have beneath her hips. You know you must return to the first mother soon, but right now this woman needs you. So you stay, torn between two fires, praying both mothers hold strong. As she rests briefly between pains, you look toward the shuttered window. Outside it is pure blackness, the kind that swallows shapes and muffles sound. You know you will have to walk through it again soon, and you will, because that's what midwives do. You serve the night, no matter how long or dangerous it becomes. The mother grabs your wrist, pulling your attention back. Her eyes meet yours. Fear, hope, exhaustion, all tangled together. "Don't leave me," she whispers. "I won't," you reply softly. "Not yet. Not until she's safe, because no Tudor midwife ever truly sleeps, not when the night keeps calling." The wind rattles the shutters again, this time harder, as if the night itself is reminding you that you're running out of time. The second mother's pain deepens, her breathing quicker, her grip tighter around your wrist. You guide her gently through the contraction, steady as ever, even though a cold truth presses behind your ribs. The weather is shifting, and in Tudor England, weather isn't just background noise, it's one of the biggest, most unpredictable players in every childbirth you attend. The room feels hotter than before, the air thick as damp wool. The single rushlight flickers wildly, throwing jumpy shadows across the thatched ceiling. Outside, you hear the soft patter of rain beginning to fall. Not a gentle drizzle. No, this is the insistent, chilling sort of rain that turns every lane into a swamp and every cottage into a faintly steaming oven. A mainstream historical fact: Tudor births were hugely affected by weather. Hard winters brought respiratory illnesses and sluggish labours. Humid summers worsened infections. Cold drafts could weaken a mother. Stifling heat could exhaust her. And since houses weren't insulated, just layers of daub, wattle, and wishful thinking, temperature shifts seeped into everything. As you check the baby's descent, sweat beads on your forehead. The mother's gown clings to her back. The husband fans her awkwardly with a folded scrap of parchment, the edges brittle from age. The air feels like it's tightening. The mother moans low. You stroke her back. "Breathe with me," you whisper. Another crash of wind thuds against the cottage wall, making the husband jump. You pretend not to notice. It's your job to stay unshaken even when the shutters look like they're considering flying off. Behind you, the boy from earlier reappears in the doorway, soaked and panting. "Mistress Midwife," the other woman says the pain is worse. She's calling for you again. Your stomach drops. 2 women in active labour. 1 midwife. A night thickening into a storm. A classic Tudor nightmare. You steady your voice. "Tell her I'm coming soon." He nods, already running back into the rain, the poor child splashing through puddles that didn't exist 20 minutes ago. The second mother cries out again, louder this time. You wipe your hands on your apron, shift your weight, and kneel closer. Her body trembles. You can feel the pressure building. She's close, closer than the woman you left across the lane. A decision forms in your mind with cold clarity. You stay here until the peak passes. Then you sprint, literally. A flicker of humour sneaks into your mind. If Tudor midwives wore pedometers, yours would declare bankruptcy. You help the mother change position slightly, knees apart, leaning forward, and her breath hitches sharply. Yes, she's truly shifting now. You stay alert, fingers poised, senses sharp. But the storm outside intensifies. Rain hits the roof in heavy sheets. A draft slips through the shutters, forcing you to shield the rushlight from going out. If it dies, you'll be delivering a child in near darkness. A situation that historically has never improved anyone's mood. Historians still argue whether weather directly increased birth complications, or whether we simply associate difficult births with the dramatic conditions often remembered in diaries and parish notes. Some say humidity worsened postpartum fevers, others argue the correlation is overstated. But every midwife knows heat, cold, rain, and wind shape the mood, the pace, and the safety of a birth. And tonight, the weather is determined to fight you. Another contraction seizes the mother. She gasps, gripping your arm with iron fingers. You support her carefully, murmuring reassurance. Her breathing turns into ragged sobs, and you guide her gently through each rise and fall. "It's coming," she whispers, terrified. "I know," you reply softly, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "You're strong, you can do this." The husband hovers uselessly, occasionally fanning too hard and hitting you with a parchment. You politely ignore it. You check again, closer, very close. Relief and urgency pulse through you in equal measure. But the worst part of Tudor weather isn't the discomfort. It's the illnesses that lurk behind it. You can almost smell the danger. Damp rushes fostering mold, cold drafts risking chills, humid air feeding infection in wounds you can't properly clean. You think of the last fever you saw, how quickly it took hold, how long you sat at a dying woman's bedside whispering regrets to the rafters. You push the memory away, stay present, stay steady. The mother groans through another intense wave. You press a warm cloth against her lower back. The cloth cools quickly in the draft. You warm it by the rushlight. Too near, perhaps, because it steams faintly. But you place it anyway. Anything to comfort her. Her breath catches. I can't." "You can," you whisper, leaning in. "You are. Stay with me." And she does. The contraction passes, leaving her trembling but steady. You glance toward the shuttered window. The storm is not easing. If anything, it's gathering strength, which means the lane between houses is turning into a narrow river of mud. You need to move soon. You look back at the mother. She's close, but not quite at the breaking point. Maybe minutes, maybe half an hour. Childbirth is unpredictable, especially in a storm. A fragile joke dances across your mind. If the weather had any sense, it would schedule itself around your cases. The weather, unfortunately, has the sense of a brick. You squeeze the mother's hand. "I need to step out just for a moment," you say softly, "but I will return." Her eyes widen. "Please, don't leave me long." "I won't. You promise." You gather your satchel. It feels nearly weightless now. Mostly used cloths, scattered herbs, worn tools, but it's all you have. You stand, brace yourself, and whisper a last steadying breath. Then you step into the storm. Rain lashes your face. Mud sucks at your shoes. The darkness wraps around you like a wet cloak. You trudge toward the other cottage, soaked within seconds. Because Tudor midwives do not get to stop. Not for weather, not for fear, not for exhaustion. Tonight, you serve 2 women, 1 storm, and the narrow thread between life and loss. And the storm is far from over. By the time you reach the first cottage again, rainwater has seeped all the way through your gown, down your sleeves, and into your shoes. Every step squelches, every hem clings, every movement reminds you that you are cold, soaked, and exhausted. But none of that matters when you push open the door and step back into the sweltering, frantic heat of the birth room. The moment the gossips see you, they erupt. "She said she felt something shift. She cried out, loud, too. I told them you'd come back. Is she dying? Has the baby turned backward? Did you fall into a ditch?" You hold up one exhausted hand, your universal sign for please. "I beg you, quiet." And shockingly, blessedly, they do. Mostly. You cross the small room, kneel beside the mother, and take her trembling hand in yours. Her face is pale now, almost grey. Her breaths are shallow, fast. Her eyes flicker open when she feels your touch. "You came back," she whispers. "Of course I did," you say gently, brushing damp hair from her cheek. "Tell me what you feel," she grimaces. Pressure, too much, and something inside feels wrong. A ripple moves through the gossips. You ignore them. You lower your head, placing your hand on her abdomen, studying the shape, the tightness, the position, and your heart sinks. This isn't ideal. This isn't even manageable. This, if things go poorly, could become deadly. A mainstream historical fact. Tudor midwives had no access to surgical tools or professional physicians for most births. Complications we now consider routine emergencies: shoulder dystocia, stalled labour, mispositioned babies, hemorrhage, were life-threatening and often meant there was little a midwife could do beyond prayer, positioning, and pure determination. You check again, your hands steady even as your stomach tightens. The baby has shifted into a difficult angle, not fully breech, but not descending properly either. This is the sort of complication that eats midwives alive, that lives in the back of your mind for years, that wakes you in the night with the memory of a mother's fading pulse. You whisper to the mother, "I need you to breathe with me." She nods weakly. A fringe tidbit passes through your thoughts. Some Tudor midwives carried a tiny carved charm meant to protect against crooked births, often depicting St. Margaret, the patron saint of safe deliveries. You've never believed charms could realign a baby, but right now you would absolutely accept saintly intervention. Another contraction grips her body. Her jaw clenches. A strangled cry escapes her. The room surges with heat, voices, panic. You steady her hips, adjust her position, angle her slightly to the left, hoping gravity and instinct will work with you. "Let her lean forward," one gossip shouts. "No, back," another insists. A third says, "She needs more ale." A fourth adds, "No, less ale. She'll drown the baby." You close your eyes for half a second, inhaling deeply, willing patience into your bones. You speak calmly but firmly. "Please, give her space." The firmness surprises them. The room quiets again. Good. Historians still argue whether midwives truly understood fetal positioning or simply recognized patterns instinctively. Some records show surprisingly skilled manipulations. Others suggest midwives resorted to desperate measures. You fall somewhere in the middle. Aware of what you can do, painfully aware of what you cannot. You work your hands carefully, methodically, guiding the mother's body through subtle shifts that might coax the baby into a better angle. You've done this before. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Tonight, every second feels like it hangs by a thread. The mother cries out again, long and urgent. You feel something change, an internal twist, a subtle realignment. Relief flickers in your chest. "Good," you murmur. "Good. Keep breathing." The mother-in-law clutches her apron. "Is the babe coming?" You nod, though not confidently. It's closer. Meanwhile, the storm outside rages. Rain drums on the thatched roof. Wind roars against the walls. The fire crackles loudly as though protesting the wet night pressing in. You guide the mother forward slightly, your hands steady, your voice low. "You're strong. Stay with me. You're safe." A joke pushes gently through your thoughts. Not a loud one, just a small spark to keep your spirit upright. If babies could read room conditions, none of them would choose to be born during storms, or in Tudor homes at all. You exhale softly through your nose, keeping your humour invisible but present enough to keep your mind from fraying. The mother gasps, a sharp, sudden sound. The shift you feel this time is unmistakable. Yes. Yes. The baby is descending properly again. You nearly sag with relief, but you don't. You can't. Not in front of the mother clinging to every ounce of your strength. You whisper, "Good. Very good. You're doing beautifully." Her grip tightens around your wrist. She's panting now, sweat pouring down her temples. But the worst of the danger has passed. You can feel it in the rhythm of her breathing, the movement beneath your palms, the gradual surrender of fear in her eyes. You stay beside her as another contraction comes, but this time it feels purposeful, steady, aligned. For the first time tonight, you allow yourself a sliver of hope. But outside, thunder rolls across the sky, reminding you the night is far from over. The second mother still labours alone across the lane. Your linens are nearly gone, the storm is thrashing the village, and exhaustion claws at your spine with icy fingers. Still, this mother is safer now, and that at least is something you can hold on to as the night deepens, as the candle flickers, as the world tightens around you. For now, the danger has eased, but it has not ended, not by a long stretch. For a brief, trembling moment, the room feels steady again, steady in that fragile Tudor way where steady really means slightly less chaotic than before. The mother's breathing evens out, her grip loosens, the gossips hold their collective breath, waiting for your next word as though you're some kind of oracle, and you let yourself exhale, slowly, carefully, because the baby has finally shifted into a safer position. But deep down, you already know what comes next. The part of midwifery no one sings songs about, the part every Tudor midwife fears but can't escape, the part that turns your stomach into a knot of dread. If something goes wrong, it's your fault, even when it isn't, even when no one on earth could have made the outcome different, even when you've done everything right. You brace the mother as another contraction builds, her breath shallow but controlled. Sweat drips down her temples. Her body trembles with exhaustion. She's been fighting this storm longer than anyone else in this cottage. You stroke her back gently, trying to calm her without revealing the anxiety tightening your own chest. A mainstream historical fact. When complications occurred in Tudor childbirth, communities almost always blamed the midwife. If a baby was stillborn, if a mother bled too much, if a labour stalled for too long, it wasn't chalked up to nature or chance or the brutal reality of pre-modern medicine. No, it was midwife error, or worse, midwife malice. And nothing terrifies you more than those unspoken accusations hanging in the air after a difficult birth. The gossips murmur behind you, loud enough to hear but quiet enough to pretend they're whispering. She's been in labour too long, one says. Something isn't right, another agrees. A third adds, voice wobbling, I hope the midwife knows what she's doing. You keep your face serene, calm, unbothered. Inside, your heart stutters. You lean in close to the mother. You're doing perfectly, you whisper, steady as stone. Stay with me, breathe. But as the next contraction slams into her, her cry shakes the rafters. Her body folds in on itself, trembling, overwhelmed. A thin line of fear flashes across her eyes. She whispers, I feel something wrong. Your pulse spikes. Another contraction, too fast after the last one. Her breath shortens. Her skin pales. You move with instinct, adjusting her position, guiding her breath, checking her hips, checking the pressure beneath your hands. You search for signs, good or bad. You search with the quiet dread of someone who has been here before, who has lost women despite all efforts, who has stood in this tight space with the weight of grief pressing down like a millstone. A fringe tidbit that always haunts you. Some Tudor families believed a midwife who attended too many complicated or fatal births had cursed hands, as though tragedy were contagious. Those women were quietly avoided, whispered about, and sometimes pushed to the edge of the community. A few were accused of witchcraft. You swallow hard. You will not be that woman. Not tonight. Not with this mother. The contraction passes. The mother whimpers, leaning into your shoulder. You adjust her gently and find something reassuring. The baby is still descending well. The pressure is strong, but not wrong. Her fear is real, but the danger isn't what she believes. Still, all it takes is one shift, one bleed, one moment. The gossips crowd closer, emboldened by nerves. She's losing strength. Do you think she'll make it? This is taking too long. It shouldn't take this long. My cousin died after pains like this. You turn your head, meeting their eyes with a calm that feels carved rather than felt. She is doing exactly what she needs to do, you say softly. I promise you. They quiet. Not because you've removed their fear, but because your voice refuses to acknowledge it. Historians still argue whether such intense community pressure strengthened midwives, forcing them to hone their instincts, or crushed them under expectations no human could meet. Some believe midwives held remarkable authority. Others argue they were scapegoats for everything that went wrong. You carry both truths in your bones. Another contraction rises, strong, urgent, unmistakably transitional. You position your hands carefully, supporting the mother's hips, her back, guiding her forward as her breath catches. She screams, her fingers claw into your sleeve. You squeeze her hand, grounding her through the pain. Her entire body shakes with effort, and then something changes. A new weight, a new pressure, a new inevitability. The baby is coming. Finally. The room holds its breath. Even the storm outside seems to pause. You whisper to her, "That's it. You're close. You're so close." But as she bears down, as the gossips gather behind you, as the room grows heavy with anticipation, you think of the consequences if something goes wrong now, here, in this moment. You think of how fast grief turns to blame. You think of how frail your reputation is, how quickly a single loss could undo years of trust. You steady your hands, you steady your breath, you steady your voice, because if anything happens, anything at all, this entire room will look at you. But right now, you cannot afford fear. Right now, you are her lifeline. Right now, the world shrinks to this mother, this moment, this fragile line between danger and deliverance. You whisper, "I'm here. Stay with me. For her sake, and for your own, you must succeed." The most critical moment of the night has arrived. And failure is not an option you can survive. The world narrows to the mother's face, the sound of her breathing, the tight, urgent grip of her fingers around your wrist. Outside, the storm batters the cottage like it's trying to join the birth. But in here, everything is focused on one thing: the baby finally moving down, properly, relentlessly, toward the world. You guide her through another push, your voice low and calm. The gossips crowd behind you, close enough that you can feel their breath on your neck. They're half praying, half narrating, half judging, which yes is too many halves, but that's how Tudor gossips work. "Good," you whisper. "Stay with it. You're almost there." She bears down, teeth bared, eyes squeezed tight. Pain rides through her in a wave, but this time the wave is headed shoreward, not circling endlessly in the open sea. You steady her as the pressure builds, breathes, crests. Then, with a final shuddering effort, you feel the unmistakable shift. The room holds its breath. Time squeezes, and there it is, a slick, fragile weight against your hands, a tiny, squirming life, the storm's loudest thunder, suddenly competing with the smallest cry. The baby lets out a thin wail, as if protesting being dragged into such a damp, noisy world. Relief hits you so hard your knees nearly buckle. You wrap the child in the cleanest scrap of linen remaining, really more least filthy than clean, but in Tudor arithmetic that still counts, and place the baby on the mother's chest. "A girl," you say softly. The mother sobs, half laughter, half exhaustion. She clutches the baby as tightly as her strength allows. Tears streak through the grime on her cheeks. "Thank God," she whispers. "Thank God." The gossips exhale loudly, like a chorus of deflating bellows. A mainstream historical fact. In Tudor England, midwives often performed emergency baptisms if a baby seemed weak or likely to die before a priest could arrive. You quickly assess the little girl, breathing strong, colour reasonably good, crying with admirable outrage. No need to rush that particular duty tonight. For once, no one is hovering over you with a bowl of water and a panicked expression. For a handful of minutes the room is soft. The storm quiets in your mind. The baby wriggles and fusses. The mother whispers to her in a hoarse, trembling voice like she's telling secrets to the future. You let yourself lean back, your hands finally still, your breath deep and slow. And then, the whispers begin. Not from the mother, who is too busy crying into her daughter's downy hair. Not from the husband, who's still trying to process the miracle of both wife and child surviving the night. No, these whispers coil out from the edges of the room, from the gossips pressed against the walls and the doorway, from the women who saw everything and understood only parts. "Did you see how she turned the baby?" one murmurs. "With just her hands," another replies, eyes wide. "Like she knew exactly what was inside." "And those words she whispered," a third adds. "I've never heard prayers like that." You resist the urge to pinch the bridge of your nose. You didn't whisper anything arcane, just steady, soothing syllables you've used 100 times. But to ears tuned for drama, anything can become mysterious, a fringe tidbit. In some Tudor tales, people claimed witches could rearrange a woman's insides, tie knots in the womb, or steal a baby's strength with a touch. Those same stories sometimes tangled midwives into their threads. Women who knew herbs, anatomy, and the hidden spaces of the body made very convenient targets in a superstitious culture. You help the mother with the afterbirth, working as gently and efficiently as you can. The storm outside rumbles again. The baby quiets, hiccups, then drifts into that strange ancient stillness newborns have, as though they're not fully convinced they've left the other world behind. Behind you, one gossip whispers, "She knew the babe would live. You heard her say it." Or "She made it live," another replies in a tone that could be admiration or suspicion. It's hard to tell. A third voice, older and more brittle, mutters, "Women shouldn't know so much about hidden things. You keep your face as neutral as carved stone." Historians still argue whether midwives were regularly targeted as witches, or whether that image was exaggerated later. Some legal records show midwives accused of maleficium, blamed for stillbirths or unusual labours. Other evidence suggests most midwives were respected, even protected by their communities. You live at the knife edge between those interpretations every day. You clean what you can, arrange the mother more comfortably on her pallet, and tuck the baby against her. The gossips help, fussing over the blankets, adjusting the pillow, making small practical offerings. Their hands are kind, even when their tongues aren't. One of them says, almost casually, "You turn that child when others might have let the mother die." "Yes," another agrees. "I've heard some midwives use other means." Their eyes flick toward you. You answer calmly, "I use the means every midwife should. Experience, careful hands, and God's mercy." Your tone is measured, humble, just pious enough to slide smoothly through their suspicions. Still, you catch the look one woman gives you, the narrowing of her eyes, the way she glances at your herb satchel as if it might sprout horns. You've seen that look before. You will see it again. A weary little joke surfaces in your mind. If you knew less, you'd be useless. If you know too much, you're dangerous. Very helpful scale, this. You keep it behind your teeth, but it warms you with its bitter truth. The mother dozes lightly, the baby tucked safely against her chest, the rhythm of their breathing a soft counterpoint to the growl of the storm. You tuck the last scrap of usable linen around them and rise slowly, your knees protesting like old men gossiping on a bench. One of the gossips steps closer, lowering her voice. They say there are midwives who consort with dark spirits, that they can cause a babe to be born twisted, or not at all. You meet her gaze with quiet, unflinching calm. Then they should not be midwives, you say. A midwife's work is hard enough without someone poisoning it with lies. She studies you for a long moment, then nods slowly. She wants to believe you. She needs to believe you, because she will likely call for you when her granddaughter is in labour. But doubt is like smoke. It seeps into the smallest cracks. And you know that if this birth had ended differently, these same tongues might be telling a very different story about you tomorrow. You gather your satchel again, lighter than ever. You glance toward the door, where the storm still thrashes beyond the threshold. You are not done. Across the lane, another woman labours in the dark, rain hammering overhead, fear gnawing at her resolve. You must go back to her. You promised. You look once more at the sleeping mother and her baby, wrapped together like a single fragile miracle. For a heartbeat you let the sight steady you. Then you step away through the crowd of gossips, some grateful, some wary, all watching. In their eyes, you are a saviour when things go right. In their whispers, you are a suspect when things go wrong. And as you open the door and step back into the hungry night, you know one thing with bone-deep certainty. Being a Tudor midwife means walking a narrow, muddy path between healing and suspicion. And tonight, that path is soaked in rain and rumour both. Rain slams against you the moment you step outside, cold, insistent, and determined to run straight down your spine. Your gown clings to your legs, heavy as wet parchment, and your shoes squelch loudly enough that you almost wince with each step. The lane between the houses has become a shallow river of mud, rippling and swirling under the storm's relentless assault. You brace yourself against the wind, clutching your nearly empty satchel, and push forward through the darkness, because the second mother is still waiting. And no matter how soaked, exhausted, or half-frozen you feel, you belong at her side. You slip once, nearly falling to your knees, but catch yourself on a wooden fence post slick with rain. A quiet joke flutters through your mind. If Tudor midwives charged based on weather conditions, you'd retire a wealthy woman within the year. You huff a breath that almost becomes a laugh, then keep moving. By the time you reach the cottage again, your fingers are stiff with cold. You lift the latch with difficulty and push inside. The heat hits you instantly. The smell, too, sweat, tallow, damp wool, fear, and above it all, the thin, desperate sound of a woman in pain. The second mother sits hunched on a pallet near the hearth, gripping a rolled blanket like she wants to tear it in half. Her husband hovers close, wringing his hands, looking at you with the wild-eyed desperation of a man who believes you might be the only barrier between his world and disaster. "You came back," the mother whispers, voice cracking. "Of course," you say softly, kneeling beside her. "I'm here." And you are, but you're also painfully aware of the consequences of being here. Because delivering babies in Tudor England is not a steady source of income, it's not reliable, it's not secure, and it certainly doesn't shield you from poverty. You touch the mother's arm gently, feeling the tremor in her muscles. "Tell me what you feel," she exhales shakily. "Everything hurts, and I'm cold. So cold." You look around. The hearth is blazing, but the draft from the storm still slips through the crooked doorframe. You nod toward her husband. More blankets. The warm ones. He scrambles immediately. A mainstream historical fact. Tudor midwives were paid directly by families, usually with small coins, food, or goods like firewood or cloth. Wealthier households might offer a fair wage, but most births were paid with whatever the family could spare, and if the family had nothing to spare, well, the midwife often received nothing. You're painfully familiar with that nothing. Sometimes you've walked home after a 20-hour birth carrying only a stale loaf of bread as payment. Once a grateful father gave you a single onion. Not a sack, just one onion. You accepted it, because what else could you do? Ask for more while he wept with joy that his wife lived. No midwife with a conscience would. As you help the mother through another contraction, you glance toward your satchel. Inside are your last 2 pieces of clean linen. You hope to save one for after the birth. But that hope dissolves quickly as you see the blood on the cloth beneath her. You're going to need both. You take them out gently and position them where they'll matter most. Behind you, the husband returns with blankets, thin, patched but warm. You drape one around the mother's shoulders, and she relaxes immediately. A quiet voice from the doorway says, "Midwife, we'll pay you when we can, after harvest maybe." You don't look up. You just nod. That's fine. It's not fine. Your roof leaks, your boots have holes, your apron is wearing thin, but you nod anyway. A fringe tidbit. Many Tudor midwives relied heavily on bartering. Payment might come in the form of eggs, flour, firewood, or a promise to repair a fence. Real coin was rare. Some parishes paid midwives a small annual stipend to ensure care for poor mothers, but those funds were often inconsistent, or withheld entirely. You've spent winters burning scraps of broken furniture because coin didn't come when promised. Another contraction tears through the mother, pulling her forward with a cry. You steady. Her, whispering, "You're safe. Breathe with me." Her husband looks like he might faint. You gently order him to fetch warm water, mostly to give him something to do that isn't panicking in the corner. She gasps. Is it close? You feel her abdomen, check her position, adjust her hips slightly. Close, you confirm. You're strong. Keep going. Her fingers clamp around yours, so tight you wonder if you'll be able to use that hand tomorrow. You press your forehead gently against hers, the way some older midwives taught you. Not exactly a technique fit for a manual, but it grounds women in the moment. The rain intensifies outside, thunder rolling over the village in low, rumbling waves. The cottage shudders with each gust. The fire sputters but holds. The husband returns, splashing hot water onto the table and apologizing profusely. You give him a tired smile. You're doing fine, you tell him. He blinks at you as though you just performed a miracle. Historians still argue whether midwives were underpaid, because childbirth was considered women's work, or because rural economies were simply too poor to sustain consistent wages. Some midwives in large towns made respectable income. Others, especially in villages like this one, lived one bad harvest away from ruin. You fall in the latter group. You scrape by. You always scrape by. But tonight, as you help this woman through the storm with her life hanging on your hands and your voice, you feel the truth settle heavily into your bones. This work is priceless to others, and almost worthless to the people who pay you. Another contraction hits. The mother cries out. You brace her shoulders, guide her breath, feel the tension building. This is the moment you've been waiting for. The moment she's been fighting toward. The moment you must meet with every last shred of strength you have left. Lean forward, you whisper, you're ready. She pushes, hard. A sound tears from her throat, raw, primal, desperate. The baby begins to crown. The storm rages, your heart pounds, your hands go steady as stone. Tomorrow you may receive a handful of barley. Tomorrow you may be paid in a promise that won't be kept. Tomorrow you may mend your own torn gown alone in the dark. But right now, right here, none of that matters. Right now, you reach into the storm of pain and help bring another fragile life into the world. For nothing. For everything. For reasons no coin could ever measure. The baby crowns slowly. So slowly you feel each second drag across your nerves like a blade dulled from overuse. The storm outside rumbles, the shutters rattle, the husband whimpers, quietly but still. And you do what you always do. You anchor the mother through the worst moment of her life with nothing more than your hands, your voice, and your stubborn refusal to let fear win. She pushes again, trembling, groaning, breath shaking. You murmur, "Good, good. Stay with it, love. You're nearly there." The pressure shifts, the world tightens, the room holds its breath, and then, with a final wrenching effort, the baby slips into your hands. A second cry slices the air tonight, higher pitched than the first baby's, more frantic, but strong, alive. Relief washes through you so intensely your vision blurs for a heartbeat. You swallow hard, breathing in with a shaky steadiness you hope nobody notices. You wrap the baby in your last piece of linen, the cloth now worth more than silver in your trembling hands, and place the newborn on the mother's chest. She sobs, clutching her child. For a moment the storm outside becomes nothing but distant noise, and then, because Tudor life refuses to let you enjoy even 10 seconds of peace, the husband stammers, "Midwife, will she live?" "She will," you answer gently. "They both will." His knees buckle in relief. He drops onto a stool like a marionette whose strings have snapped. You offer him a reassuring nod before turning back to your work. But even with the birth successful, you are not safe. Not yet. A mainstream historical fact. Tudor midwives regularly protected themselves from accusations by gathering witnesses immediately after births. A single complaint, misunderstanding, or poorly timed tragedy could send them into the courts, ecclesiastical or secular, where a midwife's reputation hung by the thinnest possible thread. So right after every birth, while everyone else celebrated or collapsed, a midwife had to think about legal protection. Which is why, as you clean the mother and check the baby's colour again, you quietly shift into the next part of your job, securing your own safety. You reach for your satchel and pull out a small scrap of parchment and coal stub you keep for moments like this. "I'll need your mark," you say to the husband. "Just here," saying you witnessed the birth and that all was done properly. He blinks. "My mark? Now?" "Yes, now," you say gently. "It protects your wife, your child, and me." He nods slowly, visibly confused but eager to please. He takes the coal and makes a wobbly X beside your note. A second witness is needed. You look to the neighbour girl who stood quietly through most of the labour. "You too, please." She nods and adds her mark with a surprising steadiness. A fringe tidbit. Because many Tudor villagers couldn't write, midwives often collected marks rather than signatures, X's, circles, crude symbols, anything that could later prove supportive testimony if suspicions arose. Some midwives even kept small hidden books of notes as extra protection, though doing so could raise suspicion if found. You tuck the parchment carefully into your satchel. You'll dry it later by the hearth at home. The mother shifts, wincing, and you help her adjust herself on the pallet. The baby fusses, snuffling against her chest. You check the afterbirth, examine her, pulse, clean what little you can. The fire crackles softly, finally sounding less like a battleground and more like warmth again. But then the husband speaks, a single tremulous sentence that makes your heart squeeze with weary familiarity. "Midwife, I don't know when we can pay you." You give him a small nod. When you can is enough. But even as you say it, another truth settles over you like a damp cloak. This work could destroy you if you aren't careful. Not just physically, not just financially, legally. Historians still argue whether midwives were unfairly targeted in Tudor courts or simply held to high standards because the stakes were so enormous. Some records show midwives dragged before judges for minor mistakes. Others show communities fiercely defending their midwives against accusations. You've seen both sides. You've also seen how quickly gratitude can turn to blame. You gather the bloody linens into a separate bundle. What few linens you had left. You'll have to soak them tomorrow. Maybe borrow cloth from a neighbour. Perhaps mend the tears in the apron you used earlier. Everything about your life runs on borrowed, patched, repurposed pieces. As you finish tending to the mother, the husband hovers beside you again, guilt settling over him like fog. We can give you some grain, he says quietly. Not much, but some. You offer a tired smile. That'll do fine. It won't, but it's something. And something is the currency of a Tudor midwife. You check the baby one more time. Stable, warm, breathing well. She's strong, you say softly. The mother lets out a ragged, grateful laugh. Thank God, she whispers. You nod, though something inside you aches. You know tonight could have gone differently. You know how close disasters can come. You know how fragile your profession is, how quickly your reputation could sour if just one birth turned tragic. For a second, just one, you feel the weight of every unseen danger pressing against your ribs. Then you stand, smoothing your soaked gown, adjusting your fraying apron, gathering your empty satchel. Get some rest, you tell the mother, both of you. You step toward the door. The husband calls softly, Bless you, midwife. You give him a glance over your shoulder. Take care of them. You push the door open. The storm has eased to a drizzle. The lane is mud, but not river, the wind calmer, the night quieter. But safety. Safety is a myth for someone like you. You may have delivered 2 children tonight, saved 2 mothers, protected yourself from suspicion, and accepted a payment that won't even buy salt. But dawn will bring new risks, new gossip, new expectations, new chances to be blamed for what you cannot control. You step back into the night anyway, because tomorrow, someone else will need you. The drizzle softens as you step back into the lane, and for a moment, just a moment, the world feels quiet enough for you to hear your own breath. The storm is finally loosening its grip. Damp mist curls around the cottages, glowing faintly in the lantern light that spills from cracked shutters. Your shoes sink into mud with each step, heavy and cold, but at least no one is screaming for you right this second. You pause, leaning on a fence post, and you finally let yourself feel the exhaustion that's been stalking you since midnight. Your arms ache from holding, shifting, guiding. Your voice is rough from hours of whispering calm into terrified ears. Your back feels as though a small mule has kicked it repeatedly. But you're not done. Not tonight. Not ever, really. Because being a Tudor midwife isn't just about births. It's about navigating a society that praises women for being mothers, but mistrusts women who have any power at all. You push off the fence and trudge toward your own cottage, knowing you'll need to fetch fresh linens, herbs, and maybe food before anyone calls again. Dawn is still hours away, and the sky is only beginning to lighten, a dim, watery grey. A mainstream historical fact, Tudor gender politics placed women firmly in the domestic sphere, but midwives occupied an unusual space, women with authority over a critical part of life. This made them both necessary and suspicious. To some, you're a healer. To others, a meddler. To a few, a hazard. A strange duality. You're trusted with life and feared for the same reason. You step quietly into your own cottage, careful not to wake anyone sleeping in the adjoining loft. The hearth is cold. You kneel stiffly and coax a flame from the embers with practiced hands. The warmth spreads slowly, but it helps the chill loosen its grip on your bones. Steam rises from your soaked sleeves. You peel them back and place your satchel on the table. It looks emptier than ever. You look more exhausted than ever. As you set your tools out to dry, someone knocks softly on the door. Just 2 taps. Timid. You open it to find Mistress Ellen, the Reeves' wife, holding a basket of bread. I saw your lamp, she whispers. I heard you were out all night. Thought you could use this. You blink in surprise. Bread is a gift. A real gift. Thank you, you say, voice softer than usual. She hesitates in the doorway, fingers twisting her shawl. Midwife, people talk. Of course they do. People always talk, but she adds, I tell them you're good. The best. Something warm stirs under your ribs. You nod. Thank you for that too. She gives a small smile, then disappears back into the fog. For every suspicious glance you get in the village, there is someone like Mistress Ellen willing to speak in your defence. That balance, fragile, shifting, unpredictable, is what keeps you afloat. You sit for the first time in hours. The chair creaks under you. You tear a piece of bread and eat slowly, letting the warmth settle into your stomach. You breathe deeply. For a moment, your eyes close. And then, because Tudor midwifery rarely grants you even 10 minutes, a sharp, frantic pounding rattles your door. Not a soft knock, a full-bodied, urgent knock. You open the door to find young Robert Tanner standing there, soaked from head to toe, gasping for breath. "Midwife," he pants, "you're needed. It's my sister. She's taken early pains." You nearly laugh, not because it's funny, but because you're too tired to cry. But you nod. "I'll come." You grab your satchel, still damp, almost empty. You snatch a few fresh herbs from your shelf, stuffing them inside. You check for your scrap of parchment, your coal stub. This time, you do not forget them. Gender politics may threaten you daily, but documented witnesses, that's your shield. As you step into the lane again, Robert hurries beside you, lantern swaying. He chatters nervously. "She's frightened, midwife. Says she's too early. Says the baby won't make it." You nod. "We'll see to her." And then he says the thing you've heard from dozens of husbands, brothers, fathers. Just don't let anything go wrong. You almost say, "I'm not a miracle worker. I'm not a god. I'm just a tired woman with herbs and hope." But instead you say, "I'll do everything I can, because that's all you can promise." And in Tudor England, people expect you to be both healer and shield against death, misfortune, poor timing, the weather, the stars, and every mortal flaw. A fringe tidbit drifts through your mind. Some Tudor men believed midwives meddled with fate, claiming that women who knew too much about the body were meddling in God's domain. Others praised midwives as angels. You live somewhere between suspicion and sainthood, a tightrope walk over a pit of gossip. By the time you reach Robert's cottage, the fog has thickened again. Lantern light halos around the doorway. You hear the faint, wavering cries of his sister inside. You pause at the threshold. Rain patters softly. Your breath quivers. Your hands shake. Not from fear of childbirth, but from fear of what could happen if this birth goes poorly. A mother lost. A baby lost. A rumour whispered. A reputation destroyed. Tudor society never forgets. Tudor gender politics never forgives a woman who fails in public. You square your shoulders, steady your breath, and step inside. Because despite everything, the danger, the exhaustion, the whispers, you walk into these rooms again and again, because women need you, because no one else will come, because this is the only power a Tudor woman can hold, and one wrong move could take it away. "Show me to her," you say. Robert leads you to the back room, and once again you become the calm in someone else's storm. The air in Robert's cottage is thick the moment you step inside, warm, smokier than it should be, and heavy, with the frantic energy of a family caught off guard. His sister lies on a narrow bed, the thin wool blanket kicked aside, her face flushed and eyes wide with fear. She can't be more than 16. Too young for this. Too early in her labour. Too early in her life. You approach slowly, softening your voice before you speak. "I'm here, love. Breathe for me. Tell me what you're feeling." Her breath hitches. It hurts. Too soon. It shouldn't be now. You press a gentle hand to her abdomen. The tightening is real, stronger than it should be for early labour, but not impossible. You've seen this before. Sometimes early births go well, sometimes they don't. You check the rhythm, the pressure, her pulse. She trembles beneath your touch. Behind you, her mother wrings her hands, staring at the herbs poking from your satchel with suspicion. "What are those for?" she asks sharply. "Ah, yes, here we are. You knew this part would come tonight. The strange Tudor remedies people expect you to use, and the strange ones they fear you might be hiding. Superstition laces through every corner of childbirth, but tonight, with an early labour, people cling even harder to the bizarre comforts of folklore. You reach for your pouch of herbs, selecting a bundle of sweet-smelling lavender mixed with mint and fennel. "This will help her breathe easier," you explain. "Just a little calming draught." A mainstream historical fact. Tudor midwives routinely used herbs to ease pain, encourage contractions, reduce nausea, or calm panic. Some effective, some questionable, some actively dangerous. Remedies were a jumble of trial, tradition, and inherited wisdom. Physicians rarely attended births, so midwives' choices often went unchallenged, unless something went horribly wrong. You crush the herbs gently in a cup with warm water and offer it to the girl. She sips, wincing, but some of the fear in her eyes softens. Her mother, however, steps closer. My own mother used rosemary boiled with ale when labour came too early. You force a kind smile. That can help sometimes. And honey with blessed salt, also sometimes. And water left overnight under the full moon. You don't dignify that one. You simply murmur, "Tonight we use what she needs, not what the moon left behind." A gossip in the doorway pipes up, "My aunt swore by roasting onions and placing them under the bed." You inhale slowly through your nose, your polite midwife mask stretched paper thin. Onions are better saved for supper. But it's not just odd teas and onion rituals people expect. Some remedies, frankly, terrify you. A fringe tidbit. In certain regions, desperate families believe tying a live toad in a linen pouch around a labouring woman's waist could draw the pain out. You've never allowed such a thing under your watch. The one time someone tried to bring a toad into the birth room, you threatened to toss it, and the idea, straight into the hearth. Tonight, thankfully, no one mentions toads, but the mother does pull out a small leather charm bag and says, "Should she hold this for protection?" The girl's eyes go wide. She looks as if the charm might burst into flames. You take the bag gently, weigh it in your palm. Inside you can feel a dried sprig of rosemary, a pebble, and perhaps a sliver of bone. Likely animal. Nothing dangerous, nothing that would cause problems. You hand it back. "If it comforts her," you say softly, "then let her keep it near." Because comfort is half the battle. You help the girl change position, raising her slightly with a folded blanket. The tension in her muscles eases a little. She breathes in the scent of the herbs. Her body begins to release its panic one long breath at a time. Then a sound escapes her, a tiny, frightened whimper. Something feels wrong. You study her again, carefully. Nothing immediate, nothing alarming, but you know that early births come with risks. The womb may not be ready, the baby may not be positioned well, the body may be panicking itself into false labour, or into real danger. You check her abdomen, her pulse, her breathing. You listen, you feel, you wait. The gossips mutter in the background. It's because she walked in the rain too long. It's because she ate cold bread yesterday. No, she offended the household spirits. You close your eyes briefly. Household spirits? Really? Historians still argue whether such remedies and beliefs offered emotional support or created more chaos. Evidence shows that some herbal practices had genuine medicinal effect while others were pure superstition. You've lived both realities. Some herbs are lifesavers, others do nothing but stain your fingers green. You place a warm compress over the girl's belly, murmuring soothing words. Her breathing slows, her shoulders relax. The contraction passes with less force. The mother kneels beside you. Midwife, will she lose the baby? You respond as honestly as you can. She might not. Early labours can settle, or the baby might come, and sometimes they still thrive. You do not add the darker possibilities. A midwife carries many truths, but not all truths belong in the room. The girl clutches your hand suddenly. Her eyes widen. I feel pressure. You calm her with a touch, but inside your pulse jumps. Pressure this early can be a sign of a fast-coming infant, or a body reacting in fear. You check again. Her abdomen tightens just slightly. Not severe, not yet. You reach into your satchel for another herb blend. This one mild, meant to ease tension rather than encourage contractions. Chamomile, valerian, a hint of lavender. You hold it to her nose, letting her breathe the calming aroma. The husband, Robert, looms nearby. What else can we do? Tell us anything. You hesitate, because here it comes, the part where Tudor families expect you to perform rituals, remedies, gestures that have been handed down through grandmothers and whispered through generations. Some are harmless, some are strange, some walk the line between medicine and magic. You choose carefully. You can loosen her hair, you say gently. Let nothing bind her. It's symbolic, yes, but it also comforts them. The mother nods and begins removing the girl's braid. And a candle, you add. Not for gods or spirits, just to keep the room warm and steady. They like that. They always light candles. You guide the girl through another tightening, gentle, manageable. Your voice stays low, soothing. And as you work, you can't ignore the truth pressing behind everything. These people trust you with remedies they barely understand. They fear you might hide remedies that could harm. They hope you secretly know remedies that could save. They need you to know more than they do, but not so much that it frightens them. It's a narrow path, a woman's path, a midwife's path, a Tudor path. And tonight walking it feels more precarious than ever. As the girl rests, her breathing finally steady, you whisper, "You're safe. I'm here." For now, that's all you can offer. And for now, it's enough. The girl finally drifts into a shallow, uneasy rest, her breaths thin but even, her brow unfurrowed at last. You watch her carefully, counting the long pauses between each inhale. Early labour can stall like this, pause for hours, or surge forward again with vicious speed. You've seen all three. Tonight, you pray silently for the first option. You need a moment to breathe. She needs a moment to regroup. You shift back on your heels, stretching your aching spine as subtly as you can. Robert's mother hovers in the doorway like a nervous sparrow, clutching her shawl so tightly the fabric puckers. "Midwife," she whispers, "is she going to die?" "No," you say firmly, because the certainty in your voice steadies her more than the truth could. She needs rest. Fear is tightening her body more than the labour is. And that is, in fact, the truth. Fear can twist labour into something jagged and treacherous. Your very presence here, your calm breath, your steady hands, unravels that tension thread by thread. The mother nods stiffly, then steps closer. "Can we do anything to help?" You sense what she's really asking. What normal thing can we do so we don't feel helpless? And what dangerous thing must we avoid so we aren't accused of making this worse? This is where your role shifts, quietly but unmistakably, from healer to counsellor. Tudor midwives do far more than guide births. They tend to fears, marriages, reputations, and household secrets. You've been sitting beside women for so many years that you instinctively understand that half the battle tonight isn't physical, it's emotional. "Sit with her," you say gently. "Just sit and let her hear a familiar voice." Relief softens the mother's shoulders. She settles by the girl's bedside, stroking her hair with a tenderness sharpened by terror. A mainstream historical fact, midwives in Tudor England served as unofficial counsellors, mediators, and keepers of family confidences. Women often told midwives secrets they wouldn't whisper to clergy or kin. Fears of conception, concerns about husbands, confessions whispered during long labours. Midwives became repositories of private knowledge, walking libraries of community truths. You have learned more secrets in cottages like this one than any priest ever will. You stand quietly, surveying the room. It's cramped but warm, with low rafters draped in herbs that sway slightly in the draught. A cradle sits ready in the corner, far too optimistic for early labour, but you don't comment on that. Above the hearth hangs a small wooden carving of St. Margaret, patron saint of childbirth. You nod toward it. "A good sign," you murmur. Robert's mother follows your gaze. "Her father carved it," she says softly, "for luck." A fringe tidbit. Many Tudor homes kept charms or carvings related to childbirth, some openly religious, others quietly pagan. A midwife had to navigate both without offending either side. Too pious, and she seemed fanatical. Too accepting of old magic, and she seemed dangerous. Balance. Always balance. You check your satchel, lighter than you like, nearly empty, but you find a small pouch of calming herbs and place it discreetly near the hearth to warm. The faint fragrance drifts upward, soothing the air. The girl stirs, eyelids fluttering. "Midwife?" You kneel beside her again. "I'm here, love." She swallows. "Will it hurt this much the whole time?" You exhale slowly. This is where your words matter more than any herb. "It will hurt, yes," you say softly, smoothing her damp hair. "But you're not alone. You're stronger than you think. And when your child comes, whether tonight or later, you'll find there is courage in you you've never felt before." She studies you, fearful, hopeful, young in a way that squeezes your heart. "Say something to help me stay brave," she whispers. You take her hand, her fingers so small compared to the bruising grips you endured earlier tonight. "Look at me," you murmur. When she does, you're not the first girl to feel unready. You won't be the last, but you're not weak. Your body knows this path, and I won't leave you. Not now, not until it's over. Her eyes fill, but she nods. Behind you, her mother wipes her own eyes, pretending she's adjusting her shawl. You stay by the girl's side for several minutes, speaking softly between breaths, letting your voice soothe her back into rest. This part, this quiet, fragile part, is as important as any hands-on technique. Sometimes a birth hinges not on herbs or positioning, but on whether a woman believes she can survive the night. Historians still argue whether midwives' emotional labour has been undervalued or simply overlooked in historical accounts. You know the truth. It is the rope that keeps women from drowning in fear. You rise slowly, joints protesting. Robert watches you anxiously. Should we fetch the priest? You shake your head. Not now. She's stable. He lets out a breath he didn't realise he was holding. For a moment the cottage settles. A fragile peace. The fire's glow catches the sheen of the girl's hair. Her mother murmurs a lullaby from her own childhood. Robert paces softly, too tense to sit, and you, exhausted beyond measure, lean against the wall and examine your own shaking hands. You think of all the women you've helped, all the secrets whispered into your ear, all the nights you spent holding someone's fear between your palms like a fragile glass egg. You think of the girl in front of you, too young, too early, too frightened, and yet safe for this moment because you came. A light joke stirs in your mind, soft, weary. If midwives were paid for emotional labour, you'd have a house bigger than the Lord's by now. You allow yourself a tiny smile. The girl breathes evenly again. You exhale. There will be more pains later. There will be decisions. There will be risks. But right now, she sleeps. And right now, your presence has held the world together for her. Tonight, you are healer, counsellor, guardian, and secret keeper. And dawn has not even arrived. The girl sleeps in that fragile, hovering way you've seen 1,000 times, half in this world, half anchored in the rhythm of her tightening womb. You keep an eye on her chest rising and falling, the faint shivers in her shoulders, the soft crease between her brows that deepens whenever the next wave hints at returning. She's stable for the moment. Not safe, not guaranteed, just stable. And in your world, stable is a rare and precious gift. Her mother hums a lullaby under her breath, swaying slightly on the stool beside the bed. Robert leans in the doorway, pale with worry but quiet for once. The fire crackles. For the first time in hours, maybe in the entire storm-torn night, the cottage feels calm, heavy, watchful calm. And it's during these moments, these fleeting pockets of peace, when you remember why you've spent your life doing this work. Because sometimes, against all odds, a birth goes right. Sometimes, everything aligns. The body, the timing, the breathing, the sheer will of a determined mother. Sometimes the room shifts from fear to awe. Tonight, after 2 births balanced against a storm, suspicion, exhaustion, thin resources, and sheer chaos, you get a moment of grace. The girl stirs. A soft, confused sound escapes her lips. You kneel at once. Easy, you whisper. You're all right. She blinks up at you, eyes glassy but not panicked. Is it time? Not yet, you say gently. Your body's resting. Let it. She nods weakly and turns her head toward her mother's voice. Her breathing steadies again. And as you sit beside her, your hands resting on your lap at last, your mind drifts to the last birth you attended hours ago. The first baby tonight. The sweet, pink, furious little girl who screamed at the world like it had personally inconvenienced her. You picture her mother sleeping with her cradled at her chest. They're safe, alive, together. A mainstream historical fact. Despite extremely high maternal and infant mortality rates in Tudor England, the majority of births actually ended well. People forget that. They focus on the tragedies, the dangers, the losses. But quiet, healthy births were common too. Midwives succeeded far more often than they failed, even with primitive tools and impossible conditions. You cling to that knowledge when your mind wanders to the times you didn't succeed, the faces you still see in quiet moments, the whispered apologies no one heard, the tiny graves at the edge of the churchyard, the mothers who didn't rise again after you closed their eyes. Historians still argue whether midwives carried those memories as heavily as modern practitioners do. They debate whether women hardened quickly in a time when death visited every street. You know the truth. No midwife forgets. Not ever. You just fold the memories into your apron and carry on. But tonight you have allowed yourself to savor one rare triumph. The storm-churned night could have taken both mothers. It didn't. It could have turned the village against you. It didn't. It could have left you trembling with guilt instead of exhaustion. Instead, it offered you, grudgingly, a moment of success. A single night where both babies live, both mothers breathe, and both households whisper gratitude rather than suspicion. Another contraction flutters across the girl's abdomen, but it's weak, irregular, not urgent, not yet. You place a warm hand on her belly and breathe with her through the brief discomfort. She relaxes almost immediately. Her mother whispers, "You've calmed her so much. I don't know how you do it." You shrug softly. Sometimes a woman just needs someone to lean on. "Like a priest?" she asks. "No," you say, smiling faintly. "Like another woman who knows what fear feels like." Something in her face softens at that, as though you've said something deeper than you meant to. Robert steps closer, hesitant. Can I do something for her?" "Yes," you say immediately. "Sit beside her and hold her hand. Just be present." He obeys, awkward but earnest. His sister relaxes even more under his touch. A faint joke nudges your thoughts. If only men were this helpful during every birth. You'd retire early. You bite back a tired smile. You sit on a low stool, letting your bones rest, letting your mind unfurl just a little. The fire casts long shadows across the rafters, and in the dance of the flames you allow yourself to imagine a gentler future. One where you don't constantly run through mud, chase rumours, soothe gossips, or fear the weight of judgment on your shoulders. A future where midwives have tools, education, respect, safety. But that world is far from here. For now, you sit in this cramped cottage, surrounded by drying herbs, cracked rushlights, damp cloak hems, and the ever-present smell of smoke. For now, your victories are quiet, private, unnoticed by history. For now, the only reward is the slow, steady rise and fall of a girl's chest as she rests, because of you. And then, just as your eyes begin to droop from fatigue, the girl whispers your name. You lean in at once. "What is it?" She swallows. I'm scared. But I feel like I can do this. Because you're here." Something warm blooms behind your ribs. You touch her hand gently. "You can do this," you whisper, "and I'll stay with you as long as it takes." Because this rare moment of trust, calm, and connection is what keeps you going. This is the quiet thread that holds your weary heart together. The triumphs aren't loud. They aren't celebrated. They aren't written about, but they are real. And tonight, you savor one, even if dawn is waiting with more storms. Dawn creeps into the world like a shy visitor, pale, watery light sliding between the shutters, stretching gently across the packed earth floor. It paints everything in muted grey. The rafters, the cold, hearthstones, the girl sleeping fitfully under her blanket, and your own mud-stained gown that has somehow grown heavier overnight. You blink slowly, feeling that familiar ache in your bones, the ache that settles in after too many hours awake, too many storms braved, too many births shouldered alone. The girl stirs, breathing unevenly. You kneel at her side again, laying a hand on her abdomen. The tightening remains inconsistent. Early labour that has stalled into a tense, lingering exhaustion. Her body isn't ready yet, and for once, that is a blessing. You smooth her hair gently. "Rest, love," you whisper. "Your time will come, but not this morning." She sighs, relieved. Her mother lets out a shaky breath too, as though she's been holding it all night. Robert slumps into a chair, a mixture of gratitude and emotional collapse, and you, finally, allow yourself to exhale. Not triumphantly, not dramatically, just a soft, bone-deep release. A mainstream historical fact. Tudor midwives often stayed with mothers long after labour paused or ended, tending to their bodies, their fears, and the fragile first day of recovery. Your work isn't over when the child is born. or in this girl's case, when the labour slows. You don't simply deliver life, you shepherd women through the aftermath. You sit with her until her breathing evens, until her trembling stops, until she drifts into a restful sleep. The morning light warms the rafters above you, and for the first time in hours there is no screaming, no storm, no crisis clawing at your attention. Just quiet, just survival, just a room full of people who endured the night because you carried them through it. When the girl is fully asleep, you stand slowly, stretching your aching back. You feel each vertebra protest. Your knees wobble, your hands, those skillful, tireless, battered hands, tremble faintly from overuse. You murmur to the mother and Robert, "I'll leave for now. Send for me if her pains return." "Oh, we will," Robert says earnestly, bobbing his head so vigorously you worry he might faint. His mother adds, "You saved her, midwife, truly." But you don't feel like a saviour. Not after everything you've endured tonight. Not with exhaustion dragging heavily at the edges of your vision. Not with the weight of 2 births, and 1 near birth, pressed into your bones. You simply nod, gathering your satchel. It's almost empty now, just a few herbs rattling quietly at the bottom. The last of your linen is either bloodied or left behind. Your tools are wet, dull, and tired, much like you. You step outside, and the sight nearly brings you to your knees. The storm has passed fully. The sky glows with the palest wash of gold and rose. The rain has softened into sparkling drops clinging to the thatched roofs. Birds begin their morning songs, a fragile, hopeful chorus. The village that felt hostile and dangerous 6 hours ago now looks still, hushed, almost, serene. You breathe deeply, letting the dawn settle into your lungs. But beneath the calm you carry the truth of what this life really costs. The quiet cost. The cost that nobody sees. And this is what it feels like. You trudge toward your cottage, each step heavy and deliberate. Your feet ache in ways you don't have names for. Your stomach growls, but hunger sits muted behind exhaustion. Your fingers throb, your eyes burn. You walk like someone twice your age, because being a Tudor midwife devours your sleep, your strength, your reputation, your safety, and your future in quiet increments. You sacrifice your own life to bring others into theirs. As you reach your cottage, you push open the door and almost crumple from relief. You sit by the hearth, too tired to light a fire yet. Your hair hangs wet and tangled. Your apron is stiff with dried sweat and rain. You peel off your shoes, mud squelches out, and sigh. A fringe tidbit drifts through your mind. Some midwives were so overworked that they never married, never had children of their own, their lives consumed entirely by tending to others. Some believed midwives were claimed by their calling, destined to give everything to the community and leave little for themselves. You feel that truth tonight, or rather, this morning. Historians still argue whether midwives were honoured pillars of the community or exploited labourers who bore impossible burdens. The reality, as always, lies in the painful middle. People praise you when they need you, forget you when they don't, blame you when things go wrong, trust you fully and fear you secretly, and still, you show up. Because who else will? You rest your head against the cottage wall, the steady coolness soothing your feverish skin. Your eyes slip closed. For a moment, you let yourself drift in that hazy space between waking and sleep. And in that quiet darkness behind your eyelids, you understand something painfully simple. You wouldn't want to be a Tudor midwife. Not in this body, not in this era, not with these tools, these risks, these expectations, these burdens, and yet you are one. And you kept 2 mothers alive tonight, 2 babies breathing, 1 young girl safe, 1 entire village steady for another day. You feel your breathing slow. The dawn warms your cheek. Your satchel sits beside you, emptied but waiting. You whisper to yourself, barely audible, "Sleep, just for a little while." And finally, you let your body collapse into stillness. Your last thought before sleep claims you. "I survived the night. They survived the night. That will have to be enough." The cottage softens into silence as your breath eases, slow and steady, and the world around you becomes nothing more than the gentle hush of dawn filtering through thin shutters. The fire is low, but its faint glow stretches like warm honey across the floorboards, inviting your tired mind to drift. Outside, the storm-washed air settles into a calm, so Complete it almost hums, a soothing reminder that even the hardest nights eventually surrender to morning. Your muscles unwind slowly, like tightly knotted ropes finally given permission to loosen. Each breath grows longer, deeper, quieter, as though the night's weight is being lifted grain by grain from your shoulders. The faint scent of dried lavender, somehow clinging to your satchel despite everything, floats gently in the quiet, softening the corners of the room until everything feels distant, muted, and harmless. Let the tension ebb away now. There is nothing left you must hold. The mothers are safe, the children sleep, the world no longer pulls at you with urgency. You've carried enough for one night, and now the only thing asked of you is rest. Let the rhythm of your breathing settle into something slow and effortless. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your thoughts dissolve into a calm, drifting haze. You imagine the village resting beneath the pale morning sky, the rooftops glistening with dew, the lanes empty, the whole world quiet and unhurried. You're part of that stillness now, wrapped in dawn's gentle embrace, held safely for the first time in hours. So let go, sink deeper into the quiet, let sleep take you softly, easily, without resistance. You've earned this peace.